Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Anderson.
Present.
Bullock.
Here.
Litton.
Here.
Marks.
Here.
Nowlin.
Here.
O'Leary.
Here.
O'Malley.
Here.
Reading and disposal of the minutes of the regular meeting of council held February 16, 2016.
Move to dispose without necessity of a reading.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, and that motion passes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I was absent from that meeting due to illness
Oh.
and asked that my vote be recorded as an abstention.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification, Councilman O'Malley. Madam Clerk, reading and disposal of the February 16th. Okay. Okay. So, I guess that takes care of the procedural issues up front. I want to start tonight's meeting by noting and wishing a very happy birthday to Councilmember Cindy Marks, who's kind enough to join us tonight on her birthday. Thanks, Cindy. Okay, that also having been disposed of, we have more congratulations are in order for the Lakewood Public Library system, which is yet again showered with very deserved adulation and praise. So we would like to move that agenda item up so that we can honor those folks first. Without objection, I would like Madam Clerk to call that item.
Item 30, communication from council members Marks, Anderson, Bullock, and Litton regarding Lakewood Library 5-star rating.
Dear colleagues, once again, we're proud to announce the Library Journal awarded another 5-star rating to Lakewood Public Library. Mr. Artbauer, Board President of Lakewood Library, explains that a 5-star rating indicates our library is among the best of the best when compared to other libraries with similar budgets and service areas. Lakewood Library shares this rating with sister libraries of Cleveland, Cleveland Heights University Heights, and the Cuyahoga County Library Systems. Lakewood Library continues to serve the needs of the community and is one of the only public libraries in Ohio open evenings 7 nights a week. According to Mr. Artbauer, evenings and weekends are the most popular hours of use. What a gem Lakewood Library is in our city. The library continues to shine under the direction of Mr. James Crawford. We are pleased to acknowledge the staff's dedication and commitment to service in our community. The library is an important asset where its users feel a strong sense of place, contributing to our quality of life and demonstrates good use of tax revenue. Thank you so much for your service, a great institution here in the city, and we thank you so much for your commitment.
Thank you, Councilman Marks. I would move that we receive and file that communication.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councilman Bullock.
Thanks, Councilwoman Marks, for putting pen to paper and inviting the library to come and celebrate. And we should not take it for granted at all, even though it's a little like LeBron James getting the MVP award. It's something to be excited about. And the library has done it again. In addition to this, these ratings, real story, I just met a young woman, mom, and family who moved to Lakewood in the last month, and she said she came to the library and she walked the neighborhoods around the library and said, this feels like home. And she's here, brain regained, actually from Arkansas of all places, and it was the Lakewood Public Library that was the front door step to our community. So thanks for your excellent work.
Thank you, Councilman Bullock. I'd certainly share those accolades for the library. I know that it's really a tremendous asset, always has been, and we're so very fortunate to benefit from it. Other council members, any discussion on that motion to receive and file. Councilman Nowlan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd just like to add my congratulations. Sincerely, it's one of my favorite places in Lakewood, in a town full of my favorite places. And spending a lot of time there as a kid, up through studying for the bar exam, it's been an important piece of my life, and so I'm very grateful that the library is part of our community. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Nowlan. Anyone else, any further comment on that motion to receive and file? Hearing none. That brings us to the resolution. I believe, Madam Clerk.
Item 31, Resolution 885416, a resolution to congratulate Lakewood Public Library on being awarded once again a perfect 5-star rating from the Public Library Service.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion passes. Congratulations. Thank you. We'd love it if you would make some remarks, if you have any, and we would also like the honor of taking a picture if you're amenable.
That sounds wonderful. I'd like to introduce the Library Board President, Mr. Michael Arbauer, the Library Board Vice President, Tiffany Graham-Cherkowski. Her two sons are in attendance and helping, and then Judy Grzybowski, the manager of the Madison Branch Library. I'd like to point out that the Lakewood Public Library is celebrating its centennial.
Can't hear.
The library is celebrating, is this on? Okay, my apologies. Mr. Michael Arbauer, the President of the Library Board, Tiffany Graham-Cherkowski, Vice President of the Library Board, Judy Grzybowski. Judy is the manager of the Madison Branch Library. Mrs. Cherkowski is here with her two assistants, her two sons, and we're glad they're here tonight. I'd like to mention that the library is celebrating its centennial this year, 100 years strong. And the community has been supportive of the library for over 100 years. The library has been led by a committed board of trustees who are not compensated for their time or their efforts, and we certainly appreciate their direction. The big project that many of you may be aware of is the Madison Branch Library. The library board is very committed to the Madison Branch Library. That branch was designed by Walker & Weeks, a very prominent architecture firm in Cleveland, the same folks who designed Severance Hall. Architects have looked at that building as structural engineers, and they believe that building's going to last for hundreds of years more. It's a gem. But there is a capital campaign that will be underway soon to raise money just to replace the heating, the ventilation, the windows, and the electrical systems. It will be no small undertaking, but it's a commitment that we all believe this community deserves. Judy Grzybowski shared with me some important figures. Last year at the Madison Branch Library, over 2,000 students received homework help. Students who patronize the main library or the Madison Branch Library can come to the library after school, and a paid library professional will sit down with that student and help him or her with the homework. Interestingly, more students in the Madison Branch neighborhood sought out and received that help than at the main library. So there is a need in all of Lakewood, especially the Birdtown neighborhood, for assistance, library professionals working with young people and the educators, making sure that they have a bright future. Also interesting, 7,800 people visited the Madison Branch Library to participate in the 12-step program. AA and NA and other support groups meet at the Madison Branch Library. There they feel welcome, they feel safe, they feel part of the community, and that's where so many people choose to move forward in their lives. And that's just one of many roles that the Madison Branch Library and the main library play in this community. So I do thank council for the recognition. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, can we have the library folks up to the front, and then we can take a quick picture and present the resolution.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
I have to say, when my boys are hungry for Batman, They go to the Madison branch. When they're hungry for Big Nate and Star Wars stuff, they go to the Detroit branch. So there is a big.
Someone could just squeeze in just a little more. Take a bunch. Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin.
Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much.
Take care.
Absolutely. Take care. We'll see you again real soon. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Item 1, Committee of the Whole Report regarding March 7, 2016 committee meeting.
Thank you. Committee of the Whole met this evening to discuss 8840-16, Civil Service Appointment Board, Civil Service Board appointment, rather, as well as 8841-16, the Nuisance Abatement Appeals Board. Council had interviews with the candidates for the civil service appointment in open session, followed by executive session consideration of those applicants for the civil service appointment, as well as the nuisance abatement appeals appointment. Coming from that executive session, council has reached a recommendation as to the nuisance abatement appeals board. You heard that at the end of the committee of the whole meeting, shortly before we began this one, as well as proposed resolution 885316. We heard from the mayor that we will take that up at a later date. Now, I know that many of you attended tonight's meeting to have one more opportunity to speak on healthcare issue that has been an important part of our discussions and public deliberations for more than a year now. We've held 2 public meetings in the last several weeks and heard from many more residents at those meetings. Though we respect the right of all residents to continue to voice their concerns, and we have listened carefully, there has been nothing new that would cause us to question the actions of this administration or this council in negotiating in good faith a new healthcare delivery system for our city. Tonight, Committee of the Whole recommended to full council that we do not repeal the master agreement, which is Ordinance 49-15. And we know that there are strong differences of opinion on this emotional issue, but there are no strong differences of fact. The facts in this matter, as considered by this council, by the courts, and by the voters last year, support the reinvention of healthcare in this city. The facts support the closure of inpatient hospital services and the development of a more robust outpatient facility. And the facts support the actions being taken to build a healthier community. The voters in Lakewood will have yet another opportunity to voice their support or opposition during the November election, which is when the referendum will likely appear on the ballot for council's actions later this evening. And while voters will have a second opportunity to weigh in later this year at the ballot, the best opportunity for great healthcare in Lakewood is playing out right now in the construction of a new outpatient facility and the inception of a new foundation to fund bold advances in Lakewood's health. We know that many in this room had hoped to put the issue before voters earlier in this year. However, this council had an obligation to comply with the provisions of our city's charter that wisely require council to approach the question of whether to repeal an ordinance with the same deliberation and care that led to its passage. To hold a special election in August would cost the city almost $90,000. Many of us believe that that would be an irresponsible use of taxpayer dollars, and it would be irresponsible of us on council to recommend such a thing, especially when so many other factors support placement of this issue before voters in the November general election. Tonight, you will continue to have the opportunity to speak on the placement of the ballot issue. You also have the opportunity to voice your concerns during the public comment section of our meeting. I would request that your comments be kept thoughtful and respectful. There have been far too many accusations, lies, and personal attacks leveled so far in this conversation, making for a very difficult chapter in Lakewood's history. I, for one, would like to leave the ugly rhetoric in the past and move forward, working together for a more promising future for all of Lakewood residents, and I hope you would too. With that, Madam Clerk, would you please call item 35? I'm sorry, I would move that that report be received and filed.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion to receive and file the committee of the whole report? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 35, Resolution 885516, a resolution to take effect immediately provided it receives the affirmative vote of 5 members of council or otherwise to take effect at the earliest period allowed by law, providing that the petition for referendum with respect to Ordinance 4915 be submitted to a vote of the electors of the City of Lakewood at the blank 2016 blank election pursuant to Article 21 of the Second Amended Charter of the City of Lakewood.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I would note, as we begin our discussion of this item, the resolution as drafted is in blank. As we've discussed and heard from our law director on a couple of occasions, this council would have the possibility under the charter to request that a special election be called for this issue. As we've heard, that special election would cost something in the neighborhood of $87,000 or $88,000, I believe, per most recent Board of Election estimates. And in addition to that, we would note that to the extent that many who feel that this issue is important enough that it needs to be asked of as many people as possible, that for what it's worth, the turnout and the spectrum of the electorate that we get in a November presidential general election is in fact much, much larger than the segment of the population that typically would vote in a special election. And so to the extent that this issue's importance merits consideration by a larger swath of the electorate, placement of the issue on the November ballot achieves that as well. In addition, I think noted at a previous meeting that it's quite possible that the city would be placing an additional or additional municipal issues on the ballot this year, specifically the charter. We have our Charter Review Commission that came back with a recommendation for adoption of a new charter. So that's certainly possible, and to the extent that it makes sense to have all of those municipal issues appear on the ballot together, we would like to possibly achieve that as well. So that, I think, is some of the background on the issue before us in terms of the resolution being in blank. So again, my clear preference would be for the November general. However, obviously, we are open to discussion on that issue. So without, I guess, belaboring the point, I would move to substitute resolution number 885516 with the word November in the first blank and the word general in the second blank. Good. I have a motion and a second. Discussion on that motion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Councilman O'Malley.
are there members of the public who are going to be able to weigh in on this issue before we vote on it?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. We have a number of folks signed up to comment tonight. We now have the issue introduced as well as a motion. So I would open the floor first to members of council and then following that opportunity to members of the public who have signed up and then a vote following. Yes, Councilman.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
thank you.
Sure.
I was just curious if yourself or maybe a member of the administration could explain the cost behind a special election so that we understand that. I imagine that's a topic on people's minds.
Thank you, Councilman Litton. Law Director Butler or Mayor Summers, do you have additional information on that topic?
Councilman Litton, thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilman Litton, the obligation of a municipality to pay for the cost of a special election is found in Chapter 3501 of the revised code. I think it's Section 3501.17. And it requires not only that the municipality pay the full per precinct cost of the special election, but also pay 65% of that cost up front. Our estimates right now are that the cost per precinct is $2,350, which amounts to about $87,000. So we'd have to pay somewhere north of $50,000 as an upfront cost upon the filing of the legislation calling for the special election.
Thank you.
I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Any additional questions or discussion from council members? Councilman Bullock.
Thanks, Mr. President. So I appreciate the thoughtful statement that you've presented to council. We haven't had a chance to discuss this as a body at all, and now's the moment. To me, it does make sense to insert the November general election into the two blanks in the resolution on our docket, because principally two things. One is longer time for the community to discuss it. Two is a greater participation rate. The fact of the matter is, in August, you probably aren't going to get as many voters, and on an issue this important, it seems to me, in the spirit of fairness and maximum participation in an important community decision, that we have a November general election where we can anticipate plenty of voter interest. If for no other reason, because of Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. So it'll be an interesting discussion. In addition, I do think it doesn't make sense for the city to incur an additional cost, however much, for the special election. So I look forward to continued community discussion with our neighbors and our residents on this important issue we've been working on for more than a year. We'll continue to work on it. And I think it's our obligation as council members to continue explaining our arguments for the ordinance that we adopted last December as best we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Marks.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to agree with Councilman Bullock and with Councilman O'Leary. I do feel that the cost of a special election would be unnecessary, especially within a couple months we're having a national election, which will call forward many voters from the city. And I do agree that this is an important decision. Everybody needs to weigh in on it, and so I'm all for putting this on the November ballot. So thank you.
Thank you. Additional Councilman O'Malley.
Thank you. Just a couple of thoughts on this. Whether we believe it to be wise or not, our charter guarantees the right of our citizens to overturn an ordinance that was passed by this council. And in an ideal world, they wouldn't have to wait 11 months for the opportunity to do that. One of the problems that we have here, however, is just the calendar of our elections this year. We have 8 months between regularly scheduled elections. Voters are going to go to the polls on Tuesday of next week and cast ballots in elections for offices, some of whose terms don't commence until February of 2017. That's ridiculous. We have an entirely too early presidential primary schedule, which has the effects of which have trickled all the way down to I think, barring our citizens from their right to weigh in on this issue until, I think, far too long. I echo the concerns about making a significant expense to schedule a special election, but this is, I think, in some ways, our hands are tied because we have such a long and unusually long period of time between regularly scheduled elections this year.
Thanks. I certainly echo those sentiments. It's highly lamentable that the calendar is the way that it is this year with the presidential. That has the additional effect, as you mentioned, of moving the primary, which would normally be held in May, up to March. And additionally, compounding that issue is the fact that last summer, I believe it was, the Ohio Attorney General issued an opinion that prevents Board of Elections from holding an additional special election that they would have normally had the option of providing the city that would have been even earlier than the August. So a number of circumstances have come together in this way, and I can certainly identify with the disappointment of some citizens to not be able to see the issue on the ballot sooner, as well as the overall regrettable nature of those circumstances. Is there any additional comment? All right, hearing none, we will proceed to the docket item sign-in sheet, which I believe there are several folks signed up. The first person is Gerald Phillips.
My name is Gerald Phillips. My address is 461 Windward Way, Avon Lake. The master agreement. To quote Donald Trump's statement about the Iran nuclear deal, it's a bad, bad deal and should be torn up. The following are some reasons in support of starting all over. The following are examples of the malfeasance, misfeasance, and nonfeasance of the City Council and the Mayor of Lakewood. Count 1, the complete failure to provide for a waiver of facility fees for Lakewood residents who are unable to pay for them. Count 2, the complete failure to provide for a guaranteed amount of charity care for Lakewood residents. In the past, as much as $7 million was provided through Lakewood Hospital. None is guaranteed by the master agreement. Count 3, the complete failure to enforce the breach of the lease agreement by the Lakewood Hospital Association and the breach of the definitive agreement by the Cleveland Clinic. No consideration at all was received in light of these material breaches as part of their fraudulent plan to close Lakewood Hospital. Count 4, the inclusion of a completely illegal, unlawful, restrictive covenant prohibiting competition for vital inpatient hospital services on the land belonging to the City of Lakewood. Such restrictive covenant violates the antitrust laws and the state anti-monopoly laws. Count 5, the complete failure to comply with mandatory bidding procedures for the real estate, personal property, and intangible assets of Lakewood Hospital. Count 6, the use of the Lakewood Hospital Foundation investment funds of $50 million to bootstrap the construction of the Cleveland Clinic Wellness Center of approximately $34 million. In essence, the Cleveland Clinic is using the Lakewood Hospital Foundation investment funds to finance their construction. Count 7, pursuant to Section 2.1 of the definitive agreement, the complete release of the Cleveland Clinic's obligation to fund any and all cash flow deficits for the remaining years on the lease, a potential $30 million, $50 million estimate based upon the outrageous projections of Lakewood Hospital Association and the Cleveland Clinic. Count 8, pursuant to Section 2.1 of the definitive agreement, the complete release of the Cleveland Clinic's obligation to make capital expenditures of $5 million per year on a 10-year rolling average and $3 million per year on a 3-year rolling average. The Cleveland Clinic has not made any capital expenditures for the last 4 or 5 years. It is estimated that the Cleveland Clinic was let off, released of the obligations under this capital expenditure provisions of between $30 and $50 million. Count 9, an illegal joint venture and loaning of credit between the City of Lakewood and a private entity in violation of Article 8, Section 4 of the Ohio Constitution. Count 10, the transfer of any and all tangible personal property of the City of Lakewood and the Lakewood Hospital Association for nominal consideration, no competitive bidding, transfer not at fair market value, $20-30 million gift. Count 11, a meaningless option to repurchase the Cleveland Clinic Wellness Center at fair market value, meaning that the Cleveland Clinic gets full value for the Cleveland Clinic Wellness Center, and the city of Lakewood gets no benefits. Count 12, the Cleveland Clinic has absolutely no guaranteed commitment to construct the wellness center or to keep it open for any guaranteed period of time. It is an illusionary promise and commitment. A guaranteed period should have been negotiated, and a firm absolute commitment to construct should have been negotiated. Count 13. The master agreement is nothing but a money grab. The master agreement is so bad that the law director and the legal counsel who negotiated such a bad master agreement should be accountable for legal malpractice. City council should be held accountable for legislative malpractice. And the mayor should be accountable for executive malpractice. You should reject the bad, bad master agreement.
Just as a reminder to folks, if you could please remember to state your address when you sign. Okay, I understand that. I'm just saying we're starting into the public comment, so just a reminder. Next we have Ed Graham.
Edward Graham, 1286 Chase. By the way, I didn't hear the library guy give his address. Okay, the council president said that there have been too many lies in all this process. Well, one of the lies was sent out along with the water bill. Lakewood City Council unanimously approved a new master agreement designed to ensure the availability of high-quality health care in Lakewood. Most people who speak English understand the word ensure to mean guarantee. We have no guarantee whatsoever that there will be health care. If you look down a little further in that same circular sent out with the water bill, they use the word, this agreement makes certain that as long as the Cleveland Clinic operates a family medical center. There is no language in the master agreement that requires the Cleveland Clinic to provide any services, medical or otherwise. If you take a look at the city's website, this false statement to ensure the availability of high-quality health care appears right in our website. It appears a couple times that ensures high-quality health care will continue to be delivered in our city. If it is assured, there would be language in the master agreement. It's quite to the contrary. If you take a look at page 4 of the master clinic, it has the phrase, while the clinic owns and operates the family health center. Again on page 4, for so long as the clinic owns and operates the family health care. Page 5, while the clinic owns and operates the family health center. Page 10, while the clinic owns and operates the family health center. Page 10 again, in the event the clinic ceases to own and operate the family health center. It's pretty clear that the clinic desires to escape any semblance of obligation in that agreement. All of this business being sent out with our water bill is propaganda, totally improper, has nothing to do with the water bill. This is a separate fund which is solely for the purpose of operating the enterprise water system. That document in there is totally improper. With a couple lawyers on council, I'm sure when they took contract law that they heard the phrase benefit of the bargain. There has been no benefit of the bargain tendered to the citizens of Lakewood by this totally improper document called the Master Agreement. I have yet to hear anybody on this council really discuss the benefits other than the alleged, well, we'll have this wonderful new health center. That is not a guaranteed thing, and I didn't hear anybody say any true monetary benefit. We start out with $50 million in the Lakewood Hospital Association. That's really city money. And we wind up with less than half of that, probably less than a fourth of that. That doesn't seem like any benefit to anybody who can do simple arithmetic. I think that this city council has already indicated its position in the committee of the whole meeting to vote to not terminate that improper ordinance. You haven't voted yet. You still have a property to correct the improper handling of this matter. I noticed in the committee...
I'm sorry, you're up against the 5-minute limit, so we'll have to come back to that at a later time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up to speak, we have Joanne Gerhardt.
Joanne Gerhardt, 16722 Clifton Boulevard. I, first of all, agree with the previous two people that on all what they have said. I'm just going to ask one question. How does it help the citizens of Lakewood to have a restrictive covenant? I would like an answer from you.
Sure, I'll give it a shot. So, one thing that you need to be mindful of, I think, in terms of analyzing a deal or a transaction as complicated as this particular one.
Very complicated.
It's a give and a take. And so, there are some things, obviously, in the master agreement that don't benefit the clinic. So, for example, in a transaction where one side is giving up property and in exchange they're getting money, if you were to look at just the part where the one side pays the money, you could say to that side, what's the benefit in you paying the money? And the answer is, well, we get the property. And so that's the view that I would encourage folks to take in analyzing the master agreement, is that it's not simply put a this for that transaction in every linear fashion, because as I think this council has done a wonderful job of articulating over the past 13 months, you have a number of considerations, not all of which are financial. And so there's, the extent to which this council is trying to look out for the benefit of the employees who, would like to have a position potentially somewhere in the Cleveland Clinic system going forward.
Answer my question.
I'm sorry, ma'am, I'm speaking now.
Okay.
So you asked the question and I'm trying to answer it for you. Respectfully, you asked the question and this is the answer. So there are a plethora of considerations that council tried to address in a very complicated issue of healthcare delivery, including, for example, the fact that as a result of us reaching this agreement, Lakewood will continue to have a functional emergency room. That was not something that would necessarily have happened without a give and take in negotiations on all manner of points. And so I would just, again, respectfully suggest that it's really inappropriate to take a specific line out of the context of an entire agreement and then say, how does this relate to something that it doesn't relate to? So that would be my response, but I thank you for the question. All right, next we have Tom Monahan.
My name is Tom Monahan. I live at 1487 Waterbury Road. And I really don't know where to begin with some of the comments I heard from up there at the dais. It's pretty apparent to me, because I have a lot more experience than a lot of people sitting in this room, of writing contracts, executing contracts, monitoring contracts. You folks did a terrible job, all of you. You, Mayor, you, Mr. Butler, members of council. And for you to sit up there and just say, well, we had to give, do you mean to tell me that the Cleveland Clinic threatened not to have an emergency room here if you guys didn't give them something? I mean, that's preposterous. That's absolutely preposterous for anybody to believe that. You just don't possess the basic tools to sit down and negotiate a contract. The clinic wanted out. You had a golden opportunity to keep the city intact and not divided because of this issue, and you blew it. You absolutely blew it. And you could sit up there and pound your chest and slap yourself on the back and say, oh, this is wonderful, I did a great job. But to take a 108-year-old institution out and come back with this piece of garbage called a master agreement is an insult to those who have any intellect in this city. And I'm really disappointed in you folks. I really am. Every one of you up there. I know John Litton came around last summer and asked for my support, and I told him he wasn't going to get it. Simply because he refused to acknowledge in his political literature that he was even a member of the Lakewood Hospital Association. He knew this was a hot button topic. And he said, well, I didn't put it in there because I wasn't in a management position. Well, if you understood that a hospital association board member is really kind of the semi-manager of what's going on there and should have been holding the clinic feet to the fire in honoring their contract, you didn't do it. Yeah, I'm really disappointed. I said one other comment, if you're going to put this on the November ballot, I don't have any problem with that, okay? That's your choice. But you're also saying you're going to put the charter on, and I think the public ought to be aware that the third amended charter that was handed out last year at one of the council meetings had been stripped of the hospital provisions in August of 2014. And when did the mayor announce the closing of the hospital? January of 2015. So a lot of people in this town knew that the hospital was going belly up and didn't have the guts to tell us about it. And I'm very disappointed. Thank you.
You sure you want to hear me?
Electronics.
Ms. Gillespie.
Yes, I'm working on it. I'm not going to give you my name because you're going to start my time. You taught me. You build a better mousetrap, you breed a smarter mouse.
With all due respect, we're here, so.
Okay, so am I, and now I got my visual. Thank you very much for not giving much patience. I am Judy Gillespie. I live at 23003 Chandler's Lane in Olmsted Falls, Ohio. I am a former resident of 46 years where I raised my family here, as you well know. First of all, I would like to say that I would ask Mr. Gilman how many ambulance runs in and out of Lakewood between 12/21/15 and 3/6/16. And along with that information, which I'm sure the man doesn't have at his fingertips, but I really would hope that he would give it to me at the next meeting, I would like to know out of that number of the runs, and I'm not just saying our ambulances, I'm saying any ambulances, I'd like to know the number of patients cared for in Lakewood versus how many Lakewood patients had to be cared for in other hospitals. So if you could respectfully be able to give that to me, young man, I sure would appreciate it. Can you acknowledge that you understand? Could you shake your head?
What are the dates?
What are the dates? Oh dear, you're taking up my minutes. 12/21/15 to 3/6/16. And you are taking my minutes. Okay, I would like to say that I want to indicate my source to you for my information that I'm going to read is, my source is from psychologytoday.com. Overt behavior is behavior on a plan. A person decides he or she is going to do something and then does it. Setting an alarm and getting to work on time is overt behavior. Inadvertent behavior could be described as autopilot behavior, period. It is behavior without thinking, like driving a stick shift. There's no plan to push down the clutch when shifting gears. It's, pardon the pun, automatic. The third kind of behavior is opportunistic and could even be described as predatory. With this kind of behavior, the individual sees an opportunity to take advantage of a person or a situation and then does so. Do you realize that the reason I'm reading this to you is I've been up here before and I've talked to you about trust. I've talked to you about many verbs and many nouns and verbs. But when I came up with this one today, I realized why I needed to speak it today. Because, Mr. President, you want us to be kind and nice and roll over and let you scratch our tummies. But you know what? You don't deserve to scratch our tummies because you haven't been nice to us, meaning the people in the city of Lakewood. And I always have to apologize for including myself in that because I know I don't live here. But what I'm saying is that I found also on Wiktionary.org, the question, is predator a noun or a verb? Predator is a noun, any animal or other organism that hunts and kills other organisms, parentheses, their prey, primarily for food. And that's the noun. I'm trying to see where I put that. I just don't see my verb. How did I not put my verb on it? Oh, well, I blew that one. Okay, don't have a verb. It was a good one, though. All right, my request of you is that being the current representatives of the previous venue that voted on 12/21/15 as a unanimous vote to approve the acceptance of the master agreement between Lakewood Hospital and the Cleveland Clinic, what do you say? Is it a noun or a verb? And I'm sorry, I didn't include the verb. Self-examination is an ongoing process in each and every one of us in this room. My ending question to you, what about the 2,686 referendum signatures of Lakewood citizens that were noted to be valid by the Board of Elections? What do you say to that many people when only it took 7 people to vote unanimously to accept the master agreement, when you have the 2,686 people that said they want to make a choice? Did you have that kind of consideration when you're doing all the back patting yourself and saying that you made the best agreement? If you really are not going to give if you're going to give the public a chance to voice their comments, then how can you tonight repeal this deal? I mean, why can't you repeal this deal and allow the people to have time to be able to have their voice be heard before they go to the polls?
Thanks.
That way you can change.
Thanks for speaking. Thank you. Tara Pepper. Is there a-
Tara Pepper, 1278 Edwards Avenue. For such an important topic, I appreciate those of you who I see fully paying attention as many of us speak. But I also see some folks that fiddle through their cell phones, and that concerns me a little bit with our tax dollars paying for salaries. So please, I don't know if there's something can be done to address that, but many have spoken, and I've seen folks just fiddle through their phones. It's upsetting. Okay. So with that, this week at work, I had to do an ethics review. Uphold our standards. Every member of our community, whenever they represent our institution, must behave in an ethical manner that will reflect positively on our institution and uphold our values. There's no privilege or other exception that exempts any member from the duty to act ethically. So things you can do to help meet our ethical goals are to guard against unethical and illegal acts and to protect common interests in our institution. Councilman Ed Graham spoke tonight. I really hope that you review what he said. I think it is remarkable. I think he is just a true leader, guiding you, and I beg you to listen to him, to review that, because you have a moral obligation. I feel that you have acted unethically because, given the revelation of the decanting plan and tortious interference, you had a legal and moral obligation to be honest with your constituents. Instead, there were lies, blatant lies. There were no financial woes. There were no declining patient volumes. There was a manufactured plan. I can't sit back and quietly say that you're doing your job. You're not. I want to. Spoke in November 2015 regarding that ER in King, New York, which was turned into an urgent care because of millions of dollars in financial losses. I stated that to you. I came with the paperwork. No one asked for it. I don't even know if you've even researched it. But that hospital, the community hospital, could no longer sustain the burden of supporting the ER. Millions of dollars in financial losses. So the hospital was profitable, the ER was not. And here we are, and again, when Ed Graham has stated to you all those points in the new agreement, which give us no guarantees, you should be worried, and don't try to sell it as the truth to us. Matt Coons, in a previous meeting, he provided direct evidence of the CCF closing the ER in Sagamore Hills. We have no guarantees. And how remarkable that our library received such an excellent rating, a well-deserved award, I certainly agree. I have much gratitude for the homework help, certainly for my children, and for their kindness in allowing our group to meet there every week. The library is a great resource. How long can such services be maintained? So it's an excellent use of tax revenue, it certainly is, but what happens when our rainy day fund runs out? $1 million hole in our tax revenue is certainly going to hurt somewhere in our community. So congratulations to the library. I hope our current leadership can support them with fiscal responsibility. We've just closed our greatest economic engine, and there will be consequences. So in the past few years, there have been more and more vape stores, dollar stores, McDonald's, Bob Evans. Is the Beck Center next on the shopping list? What about the YMCA? As we move forward, we will hold and so now I see that you're going to hold a vote in November, and the people will speak. More and more of us will be informed. I ran into a West Side constituent of Lakewood at the East Side Irish American Club, and she noticed my pin. And she said, oh, I live in Lakewood. she takes care of her 90-year-old mother, and she said, oh my goodness, I just went to the ER. And then my mother had to wait to go to the Fairview ER. So she couldn't believe what was happening. So more and more people, the eyes are open. So you want to wait till November, go ahead. More and more people will know what's really happening here. We are asking you to repeal this ordinance today before if you don't, more and more constituents will open their eyes to this loss. Your decision not to repeal now obligates you, this is my final statement, to fully protect our hospital site. May public record note, you are obligated to protect that site. No unforeseen damages, no fires, no water damage. You preserve it. It's our golden egg. Preserve it, because when that vote comes, we will repeal it.
Thanks.
We'll repeal it.
I'm sorry, the 5 minutes.
And we will have another.
Concluded.
We will have another
Appreciate
provider.
your
Thank
comments
you.
tonight. I would also note, just as a point of clarification, in case anyone is curious about this, the Lakewood Library system has its own tax revenue that it gets through property taxes. We certainly love to support the library, and I think, I don't mean to speak for everyone, but we try and do that as much as we can, but from an administrative point of view, the city is not directly responsible for that financial situation. Yeah, Jan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just want to make a brief comment. I haven't been on council very long and actually missed one meeting due to the flu, but in my short time on here, there have been a number of members of the public who have brought up the fact that members of council or members of the administration occasionally use electronic devices. The docket for tonight's meeting was close to 200 pages long. I don't have a printed copy of it. I follow along on my computer. I have my email on my phone that I sometimes need to reference, so I just want to say I'm sorry if it seems that that's a sign of disrespect, but often enough that's how I access things that I need to look at during the meetings, and I think I speak for a number of people here when I say that, so just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman O'Malley. I would also note that I think I made that same point when that same point was raised, I think, at the last meeting. But I'm glad we can cover those explanations again, and it's certainly helpful for everyone to have the reminder. Pam Watula is our next speaker.
Pam Watula, 11813 Clifton Boulevard. I came up here with originally just to give one sentence, but after hearing tonight's proceedings, I have a little bit more to say. Everyone, no, she's going to hand those out because, no, that's for next time, Judy. Judy, that's for the next time.
Please,
this is the Lakewood Hospital.
We really need to keep order here in the meetings.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Ms. Watula, please
It's
continue.
okay, it's all right. There's a little misunderstanding. This is about the hospital. First of all, I want to start with saying everyone knows, certainly loan officers like myself, CPAs, attorneys, and other professionals know that one can certainly take a single line of a legal contract to task. Sometimes one word will negate a contract, make it inappropriate, make it illegal, make it absurd. So I do want to say that I don't agree with that sentiment. The give and take with the clinic, all I see in this master agreement is the clinic taking. I do not see Lakewood receiving. I want to make a few other comments. The ER is currently rather a ghost town. I've been talking to people who have been there. I've also talked to some Cleveland EMS. One so far as to saying you could walk out with great big gobs of stuff out of that emergency room right now, and nobody would catch you. The issue that I have with that is, since there are no guarantees of health care really in the master agreement, and if they do not have a family health center, I am really worried, and you should be too, that if this ER is not sustainable, that in a year or two, when it is not making enough money, the Cleveland Clinic will certainly do what they did to Sagamore Hills, and they will downgrade this emergency room to an urgent care or maybe even a minute clinic. And if that happens, you really need to know that that's your responsibility. It really makes me sick. I want to bring a side note. My mother's in the Normandy. I spoke to a nurse, and I've spoken to many people over the last year. She worked at Cleveland Clinic proper up till 2009, and she was thinking of moving to Lakewood. At that time, her co-workers and supervisors told her, you don't want to go to Lakewood because they're closing Lakewood Hospital. So it was a known fact to everybody else except for the citizens of Lakewood. I find that most disconcerting. Now finally, what I actually came to talk to you about, I really would like to know, because the words restrictive covenant to a loan officer is a great big red flag. There's usually a problem affiliated with it. Usually somebody's rights have been negated if the restrictive covenant stands. In this instance, it happens to create a non-compete clause. I really would like to know, really, because I have not heard, how the restrictive covenant on the 5.7 acres that remain, that hold the old Lakewood Hospital building that we want to restore, how that restrictive covenant benefits the citizens of Lakewood. Thank you. Any response?
I would, I guess, point to my response to that exact same question.
No, benefit. Not how give and take baloney. I want to know how it benefits us. It doesn't benefit the council in the future. It doesn't benefit future health care. It only benefits the Cleveland Clinic by restricting any other hospital from coming in.
Well, if you're not going to listen to what I have to say, I'm not going to say it again.
Okay, please say it.
But Law Director Butler, would you care to make a comment?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It benefits the citizens of Lakewood by permitting the master agreement to be executed in the first place.
May I give an official snort? Thank you.
Patricia Russell is our next speaker.
We didn't hear the name, sir.
Okay, please, let's, again, keep order in the meeting. Patricia Russell is our next speaker.
Tis I, Digger Odell, your friendly undertaker.
I am Patricia S. Russell. I live at 2100 Arthur Avenue, and most of you have heard my comments before. However, I've been away for a few months, I'm sure to your delight. I have lived in the city for 81 years and 357 days. Facts. Before I start, you were talking about facts, Mr. O'Leary. You have a series of facts that you are presenting in, so that we can understand the master agreement and why you, as council people, are accepting this. Would you please provide this list of facts to me? I'd be very interested in reading them.
Sure, I'd point you to the City of Lakewood's website, which has a page on Lakewood
Unfortunately,
Hospital.
due to my 81 years and 357 days, I'm not terribly competent with the website. Could I have some printed material to read?
Absolutely, that can be
Thank
arranged.
you. I would greatly appreciate that.
Sure.
Okay, we're back to my 5 minutes. All right, I have a set of facts to present to the council. Fact number 1. Lakewood is the 15th largest city in the state of Ohio. I think I've told you this prior. It has a population of over 50,000 people. Second fact, Lakewood is the most densely populated city between New York and the city of Chicago. Third fact, Lakewood Hospital was profitable through 2014, and I have facts to prove that. Number 4, in November of 2015, some 6,500 voters said, keep the hospital open. Number 5, December of 2015, unfortunately I was not here to hear this discussion, Council, in 3 consecutive readings in weeks, ramrodded, that's my word, the ordinance to adopt the agreement, the master plan with Cleveland Clinic. Fact number 6, around February 15, 2016, some 2,686 signatures were presented to the Board of Elections so that the the citizens of Lakewood could vote on this issue in March, in 1 week or 9 days from today. Unfortunately, due to the mechanizations, if I may use this word, by our esteemed law director, who is an appointee, not an elected official, this issue, and due to council stalling, this issue was not able to be placed on the ballot, and now we are faced with a special election, which I understand could run up to some $87,000, or it will be on November, which I really think will do us a lot of good because we can harness these people who all agree with our positions. Number 7, the council is not representing Lakewood citizens and looking out for our interests. And you made a statement too that unfortunately my mind I can't remember that much. I think the city needs a hospital, not, as I call it, an urgent care center. The mayor calls it, what is it again that you call it, Mayor? You call it something else, not an urgent care center. That's my verbiage. What do you call it? An emergency room?
It's your time.
You call it an emergency room?
Yes.
The mayor calls it an emergency room. I call it an urgent care center, which is precisely what it will be. I think council should do everything it can to see that the master agreement goes down the tube, because I'm afraid that you also will go down the tube along with it.
Okay, our next speaker is Jay Carson.
Jay Carson, 13938 Lake Avenue. I just want to rise to say thank you to council for rejecting the proposed rejection of the ordinance and putting this on the ballot. As some of you know, I'm a little bit of a law history geek. The right to referendum isn't something that's in our Constitution. It's not something that really showed up in American history until the early 1900s. When the Ohio Constitution was drafted and when the Lakewood Charter was drafted. And the purpose behind it was twofold. One is to give voice to a political minority, to let people have their say. And people are going to have their say. But the equally salutary purpose of the referendum is to spur a sometimes silent majority into speaking. And I think we saw that in the election last year, and I think if council keeps pushing forward and sees the voters have the facts, they're going to see that again this November, that the people will speak up loudly and ratify council's what I believe to be a very wise decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Kevin Young.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Kevin Young. I live at 1598 Elver Avenue. My father was a hard-working steelworker who could make others roar with laughter at his funny stories. He was a devoted family man who put a roof over our heads and taught us the golden rule. In 1982, at the Thanksgiving Day table at my house, there was an empty chair. It belonged to my father, who died at 51 of a heart attack. He did not get to see me excel in the business of my choice. He did not get to see my brother graduate high school. He did not get to see his grandchildren, and he left my mother to attend to my special needs sister without him by her side. My father would have seen all this, but he did not make it to an acute care hospital in time for his life to be saved. You've heard the testimony of Dr. Terry Kilroy, who has saved many lives and whose life was saved because a full-service Lakewood hospital was there to save him and others he treated. My father always told me to err on the side of safety. With that in mind, I will take Dr. Kilroy's view on the importance of having a full-service hospital here in our community any day over research that might suggest that the proposed so-called emergency facility can take the place of a full-service hospital. That research is more devoted to a profit motive than it is to what is best for the citizens of our city. And in our densely populated area, Fairview is too overcrowded to properly handle emergencies from Lakewood. Our profitable full-service community hospital has been unnecessarily closed down by only a handful of people who, quite frankly, I feel are in need of a heart transplant, because if they had a heart, they would have never allowed this to happen. This small group of people have nothing in mind but profits. It brings to mind the people who were perfectly willing to say that fine family homes were blighted so that they could force families out of those homes to build a strip mall on the west side. That was bad enough. Now, this brand of thinking has closed our hospital and put lives at risk. The Cleveland Clinic likes to say they are the best. They say theirs is world-class care. Yet, they have slipped a non-compete clause into the master agreement that prevents a direct competitor from going into business in our empty hospital building across the street from what will be their so-called emergency room. This is a stunning sign of weakness on their part. If they are as great as they say they are, why can't they handle competition? It is Wall Street behavior at its worst. They want and have secured a monopoly that is anti-capitalistic and diminishes services and increases prices. Anyone can see that that is the truth. It is undeniable. To say otherwise is to suggest that I should look to the western sky to see the sunrise. This is truly difficult to say. It comes from a personal spot. There will be a lot of empty chairs at holiday dinner tables this year, now that the hospital is closed. All because a handful of greedy people have dictated to the 52,000 people who live in this town that a full-service hospital does not suit their financial goals. The financial goals of those few people. Court documents have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that the hospital was closed as a result of questionable fees and destructive mismanagement on the part of the clinic. I don't know about you, but I'll take a full table at Thanksgiving any day in favor of a shiny new building and misplaced fantasy talk of the promise that that building will bring. I can't possibly see how anyone's life is less important than the bottom line of the clinic or any of the builders who are anxious to make money on the construction of this new building. I don't know about you, but as far as I'm concerned, lives mean a lot more than money, especially when it is money made on the foundation of false scenarios. Thank you very much.
Brian Essie, 15306 Edgewater Drive. I would plead with council tonight to not pass anything at this time. As long as you're committed to an election happening in November, there is no rush. There's a complete lack of evidence and a lack of documentation that still has to come before this body before any real decision can be made. 32 years ago, I was licensed to practice law. I'm very blessed with an education, a wonderful wife, a wonderful family, income. Early in my career, litigating a very large bank case, I heard from my Harvard colleague as a co-counsel, if it ain't in black and white, it's not right. As you all know, and some of the newer members know only lately, I have been asking for documents from this city of ours. And they've been very slow and forthcoming. We know there's a litigation pending, and documents and evidence comes regularly from that litigation. 4 areas I'd like to ask council questions on, but I'm going to make a few comments before. The first is the wind down costs that Mayor Summers mentioned on December 13th were $78 million estimated, 12 million of which were to be paid by the Cleveland Clinic. I've asked for documents of those and I've received none. Mr. Butler has indicated there are no such documents of wind down expenses, although he said 4 times in his missive or his response, pardon me for characterizing it, although much information was exchanged by the parties in the negotiation. Well, please, my question is, articulate what the wind down cost estimates are by category and amount to the 78 million. And my comment about that is we're talking about $87,000
$1,000 or $8,000 for an election. That's chump change, because by implication, Mr. Summers' comments, if they're accurate, if those are in fact the true line down costs, the city is paying $66 million of that $78 million. And we ought to have it in black and white before you make a decision. Now, secondly, there's been an allegation that a bankruptcy was to be filed. I've asked for documents for this. None exist. Perhaps this was uttered by someone to others in this room. Who, what, where, when? Tonight, preferably, you could all say who told you a bankruptcy was going to be filed, when did they say it, and in what context. Number three, the bidding and the fair market value. There's been comments by Mr. Anderson, who I respect greatly, that the LHA would not allow the city to wrestle away the process of bidding, and it was not interested in bidding. LHA was Mayor Summers, Mary Louise Madigan, Mr. Bullock, and 6 others of Lakewood people, and 6 Cleveland Clinic people. Who, what, where, when? Did someone ask? I've asked for the documents. Who asked for us to bid this? Who refused? Give us the answers, please. Doesn't have to be tonight, but that would be nice. Finally, council's legal position. On the 11th of February, Mr. Butler said it was the first time he had addressed council and said his legal position by various cases. I'd like to know whether that's council's legal position. Finally, we talked about ugly rhetoric tonight and the water bill. A major lie was told by Toby Cosgrove and Mayor Summers last January, that a $120 million investment would be made. This water bill says it's 100, and those two lies, because there's no evidence to support either of those claims, expose another lie or misrepresentation by this body, and that is that the LOI, or the master agreement, was better than the LOI. And those two lies expose that it's really $20 million worse. I could go on, and I apologize for the ugly rhetoric, but I don't like being lied to, and I don't think the people of Lakewood do. So please delay your vote, look at the evidence, present it, and perhaps you can convince the people that are against this that the evidence is actually there that we don't believe is. Thank you.
Thanks. Next we have, I'm having some trouble reading the sheet here. It's, I want to say Rose.
I would note, Mr. O'Leary, that you've answered other people's questions but not mine, and this appears to be a pattern. Thank you.
Any case, Rose something? Looks like an M, M-O, or? Oh, okay.
That's me, but it's not regarding this issue.
Okay. Then it looks like the next docket sign-in sheet is Melissa Nadial.
My name is Melissa Nadial. I live at 17672 Edgewater Drive. I just wanted to ask the council members, those of you that voted on the master agreement, have you visited the emergency room since December 21st, 2015? Any of you? Not for an emergency, but have you gone to see? You made a really important decision. Have you gone to see what's happening there? Any of you?
I've been to the emergency room.
Since December 21st?
Yes, I was at the hospital a couple of weeks ago.
And did you find it quiet, or what did you think when you saw it?
You know, I guess it was relatively quiet. It was also like before 8 o'clock in the morning, so you know, it would be difficult for me to really contrast it. You know, I was never really in Lakewood Hospital prior to that. One time in the emergency room, maybe, 10 years prior to that or something like that. But
So that's, and I'm wondering, I know one of you had a really good tour of the hospital before December 21st and saw the excellent labs and the excellent work that is done in that hospital. But I don't know if others of you took your time, you made a really important decision, and if you took your time to tour the hospital, get a tour by someone who worked there and saw what happened at your hospital, what happened, who was served there, how were they served, what did it look like in there? I don't know if any of you saw it. I know one of you saw it and was very impressed by it. I know that person was. That is the point I want to make. You made a really important decision to close something that was beautiful and functioning and serving our community and an excellent place. And I think part of your decision and part of your responsibility would have been to go and see that place, see what was happening there, see what you were choosing to shut down. Because my concern is that the ER right now, nobody knows what's happening there. Nobody knows what services are offered. So people don't go there. When something happens, they think, well, I don't know if they can take care of me. They go to Fairview. Or if they get taken there, they're possibly taken somewhere else. But I'm thinking that the place is becoming so quiet that probably even before the opportunity for the clinic to build anything, they're going to say, like they did with the hospital, oh, there's not enough patients, there's not enough revenue. You can't even support an ER in Lakewood. We're not going to open it. So that's my concern. It's really quiet there now, and because people aren't going, because an ER without a hospital means if something's really important that's happening or something that I need a hospital, I'm not going to get it there. So people aren't going. So that's what's happening now. It might be worth it for you guys to take a visit, not because you have an emergency, but to go and see what's happening there now. The other question I had was my concern. Yeah, in November, we'll be able to get people, we'll work all this time, and we'll get people, we'll keep them informed, we'll keep them energized, the public, to know that they can vote in November. But I feel like that there was a plan that looked like, hey, in March, if we put it on the March ballot, the citizens are already alert and awake and they're ready to vote, and we're going to lose. They're going to vote to keep the hospital open. So this is just my speculation. I'm giving you my speculations this evening. You guys thought, hey, if we put it on the March ballot, if we make that happen, people are going to keep the hospital open, and then we're going to, this is all going to be undone. And so I think you deliberately, I think the signatures sat on Mr. Butler's desk much longer than they needed to. I think even the last time when you said, oh, it would be so hard for the BOE to get it on the ballot, it's an important issue, so let it be hard. Let it be hard to get on the ballot. You guys should have said, yeah, well, let's do it. It may be hard, but let's do it. But it was giving up before it started because nobody wanted it to be on the March ballot. So, I guess I'm not that prepared with other things. I just wanted to voice my thoughts right now and just say, we'll keep working because this is very, very important, and we will get it on the ballot, or you will put it on the ballot in November. We will get people out there, but it could have been in March if you guys wanted it to be in March, and we would have had people awake and ready to vote. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
thank you. I would also apologize. I do have to note a correction for the record. I did actually visit the hospital last summer as well for facilities tour. But I guess I would underscore the point that I was trying to make, which was that I wouldn't necessarily know what a busy versus quiet emergency room feels like. I was at Fairview's emergency room on Sunday, and that frankly seemed kind of quiet to me. But
you
again,
compare it to Fairview. Go to Fairview.
I'm sorry. What I just said was I was at Fairview Hospital on Sunday, and it frankly seemed kind of quiet to me. But again, I'm not obviously someone who's qualified to assess these things, but I appreciate you making the point and having the discussion. Chief Gilman.
Mr. Chair, the hospital census, the most recent day I have for, they had 72 patients through the ER last Monday. That's up from the week before. They're looking, their target is for 60 patients a day. Today, we've taken 10 out of 15 patients to Lakewood Hospital. Since January 1st, we've transported 60% of our patients to Lakewood Hospital and 34% of our patients to Fairview. The remainder went to 4 other facilities.
All right, thanks. I believe that actually is the final comment that we have signed up for this particular docket item. Councilman Bullock.
Thanks. Thanks, Mr. Chair. I wanted to at least partly respond to some of the points brought up by residents, but also listen throughout the whole presentation rather than get into an extensive back and forth. The couple points. We arrive at different conclusions. First of all, it's good to see everybody here, and I want to state that we're friends, neighbors, colleagues, and we're going to remain that way, I think. Even though good people who care deeply about important issues can feel passionately, and that passion comes across in the comments, I have faith that Lakewood will continue to be neighborly and will be strong as a community. We arrive at different conclusions because we understand the facts differently, even though we've been working for more than a year on understanding those facts. There's a huge mountain of facts, it's complex, and people have different understandings of the facts. I say that because it seems as if there's a presumption by some that because we arrived at different conclusions, the other side must be nefarious or incompetent or something, negative in terms of motives. And I don't think it's necessary to follow that path. I think what we have here are practical decisions made about an understanding of the facts. And I've said before, and it applies tonight, I would follow the advice that some of the neighbors tonight are giving if I thought it would result in benefits for the community. I think that it would actually backfire and result in less for the community. That's why I didn't follow the advice and some of the recommendations made here tonight. And so, in other words, I don't think that the recommended course of action would result in being able to keep Lakewood Hospital open for the long term, being able to keep all of the jobs that we've historically enjoyed, nor do I think it would result in long-term stable healthcare delivery services. Nor do I think that the City of Lakewood nor Lakewood Hospital Association has hard play in court to make. If we did, if we had a different contract in, I should say really, who's we, by the way? Is we LHA, is we the city? If LHA had a more enforceable contract, so to speak, a master agreement dating back to 1996 with the Cleveland Clinic, then some of the legal strategies urged by residents here tonight and previous nights may make sense, but we don't. And because of that, our best course of action, as we've said ad nauseum over the past year, is at the negotiating table. And that's what we pursued. And we pursued it with significant success. Now, if the only standard of success that some residents feel is success is to retain the inpatient hospital with all the jobs, then I can understand from your point of view that you think this was a mistake. But I don't think that's the only standard of success. And I also would note to you, I'm not aware of any proposal by any party that would retain the 900 to 1,100 jobs, really, which is 600, 700 full-time equivalents that Lakewood Hospital historically had. The proposals that were, well, the one half proposal we got from Metro that was withdrawn was a proposal to cut the jobs in half and the beds in half, okay? So the standard of success that some of the neighbors are asking the city leadership to attain, I don't think was reasonably possible. Now, the question of guarantees have come up. I've got, if you recall, some of you were here in December, I listed 5 benefits that the master agreement secured for us. And actually, at least 3 and arguably 4 were guaranteed, and 4.5 even. The 5 benefits were healthcare delivery for residents, preserving hospital funds for healthcare, and not losing the funds on the balance sheet, protecting taxpayers in 2 major ways, providing capacity for economic redevelopment, and retaining as many of the employees' positions. 4 out of those 5 were guaranteed, and the first, which is healthcare delivery for residents, was what we did in effect was to negotiate a business arrangement to put in place 94% of services that are currently being delivered. I'm speaking in last year's terms, that were being delivered, which are outpatient services in Lakewood Hospital. And as a matter of fact, a couple of questions came up tonight about the ER. The ER is guaranteed. If the ER would cease to be functioning as an ER, we would have enforceable contract rights under the agreement. I think part of the challenge here is that the hope for tool is that somehow legal and governmental contracts are the main way that we achieve healthcare delivery. And the truth is that in this time frame, when we're not having a city-owned and operated hospital, which we haven't had since the mid-'80s, what we're dealing with is the free market. And the free market tools are of the kind that we're talking about in the master agreement. So what we have is 4 out of 5 benefits guaranteed and the 5th half guaranteed, and we did our best to secure, and in fact I think we did better than could have been expected. We'd be happy to revisit all the evidence, and I could restate in detail those benefits, and we could do another 50 meetings. But if there's confusion about the facts, it's not because the city hasn't provided them. It's not because council hasn't worked hard and shared those facts. It's because people are interpreting the facts differently or putting a different interpretation on those or spin. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Bullock. We have currently a motion and a second.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Could I ask that that motion be amended? The motion you made was to insert the November general election, and I just wanted for the record that to say November 8th general election.
So thank you for that clarity. While we're clarifying that motion, most specifically, I would like to move to insert November 8th into the 1st, 4th, 5th, 8th, and 10th blanks, as well as the word general into the 2nd, 3rd, 6th, 7th, and 9th blanks. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, I believe we have a roll call vote on this motion to substitute. Thanks.
Anderson?
Yes.
Bullock?
Yes.
Litton?
Yes.
Marks?
Yes.
Nowlin?
Yes.
O'Leary?
Yes.
O'Malley?
Yes.
All right, that motion passes. I would move to adopt the resolution as substituted.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor, I'm sorry, we need a roll call on this one as well.
Anderson?
Yes.
Bullock?
Yes.
Litton?
Yes.
Marks?
Yes.
Nowlin?
Yes.
O'Leary?
Yes.
O'Malley?
Yes.
And that motion passes. That brings us to item number 2.
Item 2, Resolution 884016, a resolution appointing blank to a position on the Civil Service Commission.
Move to defer.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 3, Resolution 884116, a resolution appointing blank to the Board of Nuisance Abatement Appeals.
We'll have a motion to substitute on this particular item. That motion would be to insert the name Kimberly Huff into the blank in Resolution 8853-16.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion?
Mr. Chair,
Oh, thank you.
4160.
Thank you. Thank you for that, getting ahead of myself there. So the motion is to insert the name Kimberly Huff into the blank in Resolution 8841-16.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? We need a roll call vote as it's again a substitution.
Anderson?
Yes.
Bullock?
Yes.
Litton?
Yes.
Marks?
Yes.
Nowlin?
Yes.
O'Leary?
Yes.
O'Malley?
Yes.
That motion passes. And move to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. As this is a resolution, I don't believe we need a roll call. We do need a roll call vote on the resolution. Gotcha.
Anderson?
Yes.
Bullock?
Yes.
Litton?
Yes.
Marks?
Yes.
Nowlin?
Yes.
O'Leary?
Yes.
O'Malley?
Yes.
And that motion passes. That brings us to item 4.
Item 4, Resolution 885316, a resolution to enter into an agreement with the Board of Education of the Lakewood City School District to authorize the
Move to
connection.
defer.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 5, Finance Committee report regarding bond note ordinance numbers 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, I missed, 14, 19, and 2016.
Mr. Bullock.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. The Finance Committee met to discuss these ordinances on February 29th in a joint session with the Audit Committee. We heard presentations from our financial experts, Director Pay, as well as our bond counsel, Catherine Schwartz of Bricker and Eckler, and our investment banker, Jeff Rink of Key Bank. My compliments I'd like to express to the diligence and skill of our financial team, which, number one, gave us a presentation on the basics of municipal finance, and number two, as you'll hear, have outlined a strategy to save the city significant amounts of money and to continue to safeguard and strengthen the city's bond rating. The experts described to the city leaders our strategy for financing our various capital improvements and our capital equipment leases this year, in 2016, and in refinancing previously issued debt. The amounts total not to exceed $55,144,000, although the actual anticipated amount will be closer to $50 million. All of that financing, except for about $10.5 million, is previous debt being refinanced to produce savings rather than issuing. That's not all new debt and new spending. The significance of this year, this is a larger than normal opportunity to refinance. The significance of that is that 10 years ago, we had quite a number of bond series issued. Now in year 10, we have an opportunity to refinance, and we would like to take advantage of that because we're in a much lower interest rate environment today compared to 10 years ago. If you could recall, 10 years ago, we had a robust economy, bubble in the housing market. The interest rates are quite different than they are today. By refinancing now, the city has the opportunity to save quite a bit of money. In fact, in the presentation, the total, it's on the order of close to $200,000 a year, totaling nearly $3 million by the year 2031. That's actually $2.938 million. Those savings will go to reduce pressure on our various capital funds, and essentially we'll have more room to do more projects in future years. So the committee concluded with a series of recommendations to full council to adopt. Ordinance 5-16 with a substitution, and with a we've been too successful in fixing our microphone issue, and with a substitute certificate attached. Maybe we could council members hit their button. What you can do is you can make it mute unless you hit the button. So we
Everyone's up.
All right. In addition, we recommend adoption of 6, 16, 7, 16, 8, 16, 9, 16, 10, 16, 11, 16, 12, 16, 13, 16, and 14, 16, which is a special project that may merit further discussion. And separately, we recommended for adoption on third reading, although not tonight, 1916, a substitute ordinance to insert U.S. Bank Corp. As the financial agent in 2016. So with that long-winded oral report, I'll move to receive and file.
Second. Any discussion on that motion to receive and file? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 6, ordinance 516, an ordinance not to exceed $18 million of bonds for the purpose of the city's West End sewer separation project. This is a substitute.
Move to substitute. Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on this substitution?
Madam Chair, or Mr. Chair, sorry, that's
No worries.
flashback to 2015. There's an attached financial certificate that's also a substitute. Perhaps Director Pay could explain the correction or the update to that.
Thank you, Director Pay. Now that I've been inadvertently neutered, it's okay.
Because there was a change to the ordinance, our bonds council realized the substitution of the ordinance and hence the fiscal officer certificate that accompanies all of the bond ordinances needed to be updated as well.
Thank you, and thanks, Mr. Chair. Motion's been made and seconded to substitute. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Anderson?
Yes.
Bullock?
Yes.
Litton?
Chairman,
Yes.
Marks?
Put my name in
Nowman?
to speak on this.
O'Leary? O'Mel?
Yes. Yes.
Did I get it wrong?
I'm sorry, I do want to acknowledge that there's someone standing at the podium. However, I have the public comment sheets with me and the docket sign-in sheets. Mr. Graham, I'm not seeing your name on this particular docket item, but
I put my name on there for the items from 5 to 30, I think it was.
I'm not seeing that, sir. I know that you were signed up to speak on the hospital issue.
That's right. I also put my name on for,
Okay. Okay,
the
please,
items.
you have 5 minutes to address ordinance 5-16.
Thank you. I don't think it'll take 5 minutes.
Yes, sir. I
I'd
apologize.
just like to find out if requests for proposals were sent out for bond counsel on all these financial items.
As you know, this is not typically a question and answer period. However, in the ongoing spirit of graciousness that council has extended throughout this evening, I will allow a member of the administration to respond on that point if there's a response to be given on that point. If not, we can move on.
Yes, I would have to go and research the exact date, but yes, we did do request for quotes. It wasn't a formal request for a proposal, but request for proposal is not necessary for this type of service. Our previous bond counsel with Benish, Steve Grassbaugh, retired, and so we put out a quote with what we anticipated to do in the upcoming years. These bond issuances were part of that, and it was awarded to Bricker Neckley.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
now we have...
That'll cover my request on these various finance, same question on all of them, so
Great.
I'll be done with it.
Thanks. So we had a motion, and I believe we had a roll call vote to substitute, and that passed. So I would move to adopt.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, we need a roll call vote to adopt the substitute.
Anderson.
Yes.
Bullock.
Yes.
Litton.
Yes.
Marks. Nowling.
Yes.
O'Leary.
Yes.
O'Malley.
And that motion passes. Ordinance 616.
Ordinance 616, an ordinance not to exceed $26,500,000 of bonds for the city's Rockport Square Improvement General Obligation bonds.
Move to adopt.
Second.
The motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 8, ordinance 716, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of notes in the amount of not to exceed $4,845,000 for the designing, engineering, and constructing sewer improvements.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? And that motion passes.
Item 9, ordinance 816, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of notes in the amount of not to exceed $1,640,000 for water improvements.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 10, ordinance 916, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of notes in the amount of not to exceed $1,500,000 to pay costs of improving Andrews Avenue, Athens Avenue, Chesterland, Concord Drive, Delaware Avenue, Erie Cliff Drive, Hall Avenue, Lake Point Drive, Leedale Avenue, Leonard Avenue, Mars Avenue, McKinley Avenue, Northwood Avenue, Richland Avenue, Shaw Avenue, and West 117th Street.
Everyone's favorite street resurfacing. I would move to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 11, ordinance 1016, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of notes in the amount of not to exceed $750,000 to pay the cost of improving parks.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? And that motion passes.
Item 12, ordinance 1116, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of notes in the amount of not to exceed $650,000 to pay costs of improving sidewalks.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 13, ordinance 1216, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of notes in the amount of not to exceed $355,000 to pay costs of improving Franklin Avenue and Hilliard Road.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 14, ordinance 1316, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of notes in the amount of not to exceed $200,000 to pay costs of replacing or improving roofs of the fire station and Winterfest Ice Rink.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. Cindy, you're nothing on that, right? Yep, sorry, just nothing on for discussion. Okay. Sorry, we're experiencing some technical difficulties there. We just wanted to make sure everyone was with us. No further discussion on that. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 15, ordinance 1416, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of notes in the amount of not to exceed $704,000 for installing revetment on the northerly property line of the Meridian condominium.
Okay, this one we do have someone signed up to speak on, if I'm not mistaken. And this is Rose Moore, is it?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Moore.
I was hoping to wait until you passed it to make the comment.
Oh, well.
Rose Moore, 12550 Lake Avenue. Okay, so if you could proceed with that, and then I basically have a thank you for you, I hope.
Oh, all right. Well, if you're going to twist our arm, I guess. adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Haynes.
I was on the fence about it, but now that we have someone to give us a thank you, I'm more than happy to give my support and give the opportunity.
Good to know. Thank you. Okay, we've got a motion. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, that motion passes. Ms. Rowe.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, Mr. O'Leary, I'm Rose Moore, 12550 Lake Avenue. I'm president of the Meridian Condominium Board of Directors. On behalf of the Meridian, I would like to thank all of the members of the City Council for their support of our shoreline protection project. We would also like to give special thanks to Jennifer Pay and Jennifer Swallow for their invaluable assistance and after-hours participation in 2 town hall meetings that we had at the Meridian. And also, we want to give special thanks to Mark Papke for his help with the engineering. And with the City of Lakewood's support, the Meridian is able to offer their owners a financing option for the first time. And thanks to all of you for making this option possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. O'Malley.
I just want to acknowledge and thank the Condo Association at Meridian and everyone else. I think this is a very necessary public project, not just, I mean, I'm sure the residents of the Meridian have a very significant private interest in having this take place, but there's a significant public interest as well. At the last Public Works Committee meeting, there was this photo passed around, and it looks like a meteor struck the side of the cliff, and it's very concerning, and we have a lot to do to make sure we protect our shoreline, and I'm glad that the city was able to work with the owners there to come to this agreement.
Thoroughly agreed. Anyone else? Comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes, I echo those statements, and honestly, I wasn't quite sure many of the details on this issue until we had such a thorough and fair public hearing a couple of weeks ago, which all the members of the team that sort of put this together gave presentations. You're available for question and answer. And this is really up front, and the individual owners of the condos in the building will be making these payments back to the city. So it is a little bit of everyone working together, and I appreciate the opportunity to do so. I appreciate the appetite for the Condo Association and members to reinvest in that really valuable property for all of Lakewood. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilman Marks.
Rose, before you leave.
Rose, before you leave, just wanted to thank you for coming and acknowledging the administration and council for their support on this issue. I'm grateful for Director Pay, her opportunity that she took to meet with you to make sure that, that I spoke with several residents and their concern about what it would cost them to make these shoreline improvements that are so necessary for the beautiful shoreline. And Director Pay did a great job to make sure that we were able to be helpful in securing finances so this could move forward. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming and sitting for such a great length of time in order to acknowledge all of us. We appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Right. We had a great time working with Jennifer and all the people in City Council and Mayor Summers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 16.
Item 16, ordinance 1916.
Move to defer.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded.
Point of order, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I suppose I don't understand. Is moving to defer the same as putting it on second reading?
Yes.
Okay, very good, thanks.
Yeah, I think we've possibly talked about that maybe in a less widely attended committee of the whole meeting, possibly, but the previous council had a practice of placing things on a reading by motion. Essentially, the point of having 3 readings, obviously, is that it be read publicly 3 times, and that purpose is accomplished by the reading of it publicly. So
Your point is, because it's in the docket, it's automatically on second reading?
Yes.
Essentially. Okay, thank you.
Correct, Law Director Butler?
As long as it's read at least by title by the clerk. and by title is the language that appears in the docket,
Okay.
in the summary language. So I would suggest that we, if we don't make the specific motion to place on second reading, we at least permit the clerk to read the ordinance by title.
Okay. Madam Clerk, do we have the ordinance by title?
Ordinance 1916, an ordinance to enter into equipment leases in forms approved by the Director of Law on behalf of the City of Lakewood.
Okay. Move to defer.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 17, ordinance 2016, an ordinance authorizing the transfer in advance of certain funds.
Move to defer.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 18, Public Works Committee report regarding Resolution 885116.
Let's see. We have Councilman Nella.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dear members of council, the Public Works Committee met Monday, February 22nd, 2016. All members of council were present, as were Finance Director Fay, Public Works Director Benno, Assistant Law Director Swallow, City Engineer Mark Papke, and 14 interested members of the public. The committee discussed Resolution 8851-16 pertaining to a project proposed by the Meridian Condominium to construct a revetment to control shoreline erosion at the property. The resolution is the first step of the special assessment process initiated by the Meridian and outlined in the charter. The Meridian submitted a petition to the Law Department indicating that nearly 70% of its ownership supports the project. Mr. Papke and the Meridian's project engineer discussed the need for the project and its merits. The revetment will help to slow the rate of erosion, which is on average 6 inches per year. Director Pay discussed the financing strategy. The city will issue a one-year note for $704,000 to pay for the project's construction. The final project costs will be split among the Meridian's owners, who will have the option to pay the bill in full or have the amount added to their property taxes and spread over 20 years. Resolution 8851-16 allows the city to move forward with the next steps of the special assessment process. Before the final assessment is made, council will be asked to pass an ordinance with more details. The committee voted unanimously to recommend adoption of Resolution 8851-16 to full council. Sincerely, yours truly, move to receive and file that report.
Second. We have a motion and a second to receive and file that report. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 19, Resolution 885116, a resolution declaring it necessary to construct and provide improvements to protect the northerly property line of the Meridian condominium to provide and construct and install a revetment on the northerly property line of Lake Erie at the Meridian condominium location at 12550 Lake Avenue.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on this motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 20, Rules and Ordinances Committee report regarding Ordinance 1516.
Move to defer.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 21, Ordinance 1516.
Move to defer.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 22, communication from Planning and Development Director Siley regarding Planning Commission approval of 216.
Director Siley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Chair, sorry, Councilman Bullock said the motion and...
Must be my suit.
You look great. This is related to the Planning Commission's recommendation about the revisions to the sign code, specifically Chapter 1151 being revoked and the updates to Chapter 1329. However, based on discussion we had prior to the meeting, it's my understanding that council would like to further discuss this at the committee, so I ask it be referred to the committee of the whole.
Indeed. Thank you. Move to receive and file that communication.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion of that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 23, Ordinance 216, an ordinance to amend various sections within Chapter 1329, signs of the codified ordinances and other sign-related sections in order to update the code.
This notes that it has been referred to committee of the whole. Out of a total abundance of caution, I move that we continue the discussion in committee of the whole?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion on that? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 24, communication from Planning and Development Director Siley regarding Planning Commission approval of substitute ordinance 1616.
Director Silent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Refer council's attention to my correspondence. As you recall, this was just an error of omission when we updated the parking code a few months ago, specifically overtly identifying restrictions for parking in the front yard of residential properties. We just asked that Planning Commission recommends that this modification be adopted by council, and we ask for approval this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would move to receive and file that communication.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 25, ordinance 1616, and ordinance to amend section 114305, schedule of uses and space requirements of the codified ordinances. This is a substitute.
Move to substitute.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to substitute? Hearing none. All those in, sorry, we need a roll call on the motion to substitute.
Anderson?
Yes.
Bullock?
Yes.
Litton?
Yes.
Marks?
Yes.
Nowlin?
Yes.
O'Leary?
Yes.
O'Neill?
Yes.
That motion passes. Move to adopt as substituted.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion on that motion. Hearing none. Madam Clerk.
Anderson?
Yes.
Bullock?
Yes.
Litton?
Yes.
Marks?
Yes.
Nowlin?
Yes.
O'Leary?
Yes.
O'Neill?
Yes. That motion passes.
Item-
Madam Clerk.
Item 26, ordinance 1816, and ordinance amending section 33108, driving in marked lanes or continuous lanes of traffic of the codified ordinances, and making further provision in order to permit bicyclists to operate bicycles in bus lanes during restricted hours.
I'd note that this has been renumbered in case there's any confusion there. However, I would move to defer.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 27, ordinance 2116, an ordinance to approve the editing and inclusion of certain ordinances and resolutions as parts of the various component codes of the codified ordinances.
Move to defer.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 28, communication from council members Marks and O'Leary regarding supporting the Cuyahoga County Health and Human Services levy, March 15, 2016.
Councilwoman Marks, if you'd be so kind.
Thank you, Mr. President. To Lakewood City Council, dear members of council, the attached resolution encourages Lakewood voters to support issue 23 Cuyahoga County Health and Human Services levy on the March 15, 2016 primary ballot. This is a renewal with no tax increase. The dollars are spent on services prevention, early intervention, and trauma services for citizens of Cuyahoga County. Voting for the 4.8 mil renewal levy will continue critical services including funding for Metro Health Hospital, for children at risk of abuse and neglect, and services that help keep seniors healthy and in their homes. The dollars generated by the levy provide the largest share of local support for programs through which local agencies address the needs of our most vulnerable neighbors. Access to services is also assured to any Cuyahoga County resident who may need assistance in times of trauma or crisis. Please join us in supporting this renewal levy. Move to receive and file.
Second. Any discussion on that motion to receive and file that communication? I would personally add that I think that it's really an important topic. I know that council has in the past weighed in on issues of significant import, such as this one, and I would strongly encourage all of our residents to seriously consider supporting a levy that brings great benefit to our city through many services. Okay. Any other discussion on that motion to receive and file that communication? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 28, resolution 88, this is another correction, I'm sorry, 885816, A resolution supporting issue 23, the Cuyahoga County Health and Human Services Renewal Levy.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Abstentions?
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 33, communication from Councilmember Marks regarding Animal Safety and Welfare Advisory Board appointment.
Dear council colleagues, I'm happy to reappoint Kara Lasher to the Animal Safety and Welfare Advisory Board. Kara's service on the board began in 2014. She's eager to continue her work with the board over the next 2 years. Move to receive and file.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion and communication from Councilmember Marks? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 34, communication from Councilmember Nowlan regarding appointment to Animal Safety and Welfare Advisory Board.
Councilman Nella.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dear members of council, this letter serves to notify you of my reappointment of Melissa Lincoln to the Animal Safety and Welfare Advisory Board for the 2-year term commencing on January 1, 2016. I thank Ms. Lincoln for her past service and for her willingness to continue serving on this board. Sincerely yours, Lucas and Biden.
Second. Any discussion on that motion or communication from Councilman Nella? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 36, communication from Planning and Development Director Siley regarding sale of vacant land.
Director Siley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of council, direct your attention to my correspondence. This is a request to retain the services of a real estate broker and sell a number of vacant lots that were the result of demolitions over the last several years of nuisance properties. I ask that be referred to the Housing Committee for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Move to receive and file that report.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion or communication from Director Siley? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 37, ordinance 2216, an ordinance to enter into an agreement with the licensed real estate broker to market for sale the real property located at 1252 Westlake Avenue, vacant lot associated with 1589 Newman Avenue, 1589 Newman Avenue, 1635 Hopkins Avenue, and 1214 Gladys Avenue for a period of 120 days pursuant to section 15507 of the codified ordinances.
Move to refer to housing.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion to refer? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 38, communication from Planning and Development Director Siley regarding asbestos abatement and demolition Hilliard Theater property.
Director Siley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of council, again, direct your attention to my correspondence. Ask that this be referred to committee of the whole for further discussion around the imminent demolition of the Hilliard Theater and the likely timeline and strategy around that project. Thank you.
Thank you. Move to receive and file that communication.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Anderson.
I just wanted to, show my appreciation for this ongoing effort and would ask the director if there's a communication plan with the local merchants associated with the outreach on timing, et cetera.
There will be, that'll be part of our update at the committee discussion. So, thank you.
Thanks. Councilman Bullock.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Director Siley, I recall there's a $200,000 or $250,000 asbestos grant, remediation grant we've already received in hand. That's not reflected in the letter, but that's basic for my question. So the numbers we're talking about are up to $1 million, but presumably the city's cost would be less. That existing grant, I recall, we're hoping to pursue successfully additional asbestos abatement grants, correct?
That's correct. Part of the update, so that's our outer edge of what this could cost us. Our expectation is probably closer to $800,000 with hopeful reimbursements or hopeful for reimbursements for some grants. However, based on a condition of one of those $200,000 grants, we would have to have ownership of the property. We're working toward an agreement with the owner of the Hilliard Theater. Recently, he let us know that he was no longer interested in participating in that agreement, so I'll be able to give you a more thorough update of kind of the mechanics of what's likely to happen when we discuss this in committee. So,
Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion to refer to housing, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 39.
Mr. Chair, is that referred to committee of the whole or to housing?
Housing committee.
Item 39, Resolution 885616, a resolution to enter an inter-agreement for a provision of asbestos abatement and demolition services related to the Hilliard Theater in an amount not to exceed $1 million.
I'm sorry, that was committee of the whole. I apologize. Housing was the previous referral. Let's, I guess, clean that up by motion really quickly. I move to refer Resolution 885616 to committee of the whole.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Thanks again to Mr. Litton for that catch. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 40, communication from Fire Chief Gilman regarding Severe Weather Awareness Week.
Chief Gilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dear members of council, attached, please find a resolution for your consideration proclaiming March 20th through March 26, 2016 as Severe Weather Awareness Week. This is Lakewood's opportunity to join a statewide tornado drill and effort to test the emergency alert system and other components of emergency management. In addition, community awareness and planning for such threats as tornadoes can result in the saving of lives and prevention of injury. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Move to receive and file that communication.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 41, Resolution 885716, a resolution proclaiming March 20th through March 26, 2016 as Severe Weather Awareness Week.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that motion passes.
Item 42, liquor permit application for a D1 transfer to 17100 Detroit Avenue from JGN Enterprises, 950 Medina Road, Medina, Ohio.
Thank you. This particular establishment, I believe we've received a report on this, and this particular establishment lies in Councilman Anderson's ward.
Mr. Chair, no reason to object.
Thank you. Move to file without objection.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, that motion passes. That brings us to the end of our docket for this evening. We have a number of folks signed up for public comment. The first of which is Gerald Phillips.
Somebody left a pen up here.
Oh, that's mine. Thank you, Jerry.
I believe the Lakewood Hospital Association and the Cleveland Clinic perpetrated a fraud on City Council. The only question is, did City Council participate in the conspiracies of such fraud, or through incompetency, they approved the master agreement? The jury's still out on that, and at this point, the benefit of a doubt is for the latter. But after tonight, that question becomes a little more questionable. Mr. Graham gave an excellent presentation concerning the master agreement and no guarantees, and I did not hear 1 ounce of rebuttal to that from any of the attorneys or Mr. Butler. 3, a number of speakers, including myself, Mr. Graham, myself, Brian Essie, asked about documents concerning this process that bears on this issue, and other speakers. But I didn't hear anybody rebut those facts and question those facts. You just ignored them. Also, I have not heard why there was no meaningful opportunity presented for proposal for Metro or other health care providers when they were given a 2-week ultimatum, and the clinic had over 1 year. The clinic got extremely favorable conditions. and those other healthcare providers in Metro were extremely discriminated, and I've heard no explanation of what the difference in the treatment. Also, I understand there's 2 or 3 attorneys on city council and the law director, but I have not heard any concrete legal arguments why the city had a weak case for enforcing the lease agreement against Lakewood Hospital Association and the clinic on a definitive agreement. I know of no legal opinion. I reviewed that. I've heard statements, general statements, there was no leverage against the clinic. I read the agreement. I looked at the breaches. You had extreme leverage. I just don't know why you didn't use it. There were some comments made by Mr. Bullock about 4 or 4.5 points. Those were general comments of what he thought were favorable attributes or advantages for the city for the master agreement. One was the assurance of healthcare delivery in the city. That was extremely rebutted by Mr. Graham. I heard nobody dispute the fact that there's no guarantee in the master agreement. Also, the preservation of hospital funds. I heard nobody refute my provisions in section 2.1 of the definitive agreement, how the clinic was left off of substantial $1 million obligations with no recourse. Also, for the taxpayer protection, that was one general argument, but I heard nobody refute the fact that this was nothing but a money grab for the clinic. There was an issue about cash flow. I got the first quarter 2015 financial statements. They show a positive cash flow after EBITDA of $500,000, not the so-called $1 million, $500,000 loss. Finally, there was comments about the guarantee emergency services. Section 2.4 of the master agreement, quote, "The need for emergency services may change with time, and given current industry circumstances, it is difficult to predict such change. The ongoing evaluation of emergency services will be done consistently with section 2.3 above. For so long as the clinic owns and operates the FHC, the clinic agrees to provide the emergency services on a 24/7, 365 basis in Lakewood." That's no guarantee. 2.3, due to the uncertainty regarding and the potential rapidly changing nature of the approach to delivering healthcare services, the parties acknowledge that it will be necessary for the clinic to continually reevaluate the services provided at the FHC. The latter part, therefore, based upon the clinic's assessment, utilization of healthcare services and regulatory concerns, and in consultation with the FHC Community Advisory Board, defined below as appropriate, the clinic may modify the services listed on Exhibit C as necessary to address the results of such evaluation subject to 2.4. We got a couple attorneys on council, we got the law director, you got law degrees, where's the guarantee for the residents, the protection, and the people in Lakewood?
I know that we had the issue last time, thanks. Mr. Graham.
When another one of the questioners this evening asked, what benefit has the city derived from the restrictive covenant? I heard the chair say, we got the property. Lakewood didn't get any property that it didn't already own. And an ER, we already have an ER. The law director responded that the benefit was to enable the master agreement. Well, the master agreement is only for the benefit of the Cleveland Clinic. There is zero benefit in that master agreement. To have a valid agreement, you got to have some consideration. What was the consideration for the city of Lakewood to put a restrictive covenant on its very valuable property. No one has given any rational answer to that. One of the things Mr. Bullock said also on, I believe, the same topic, a benefit was protecting taxpayers two ways. Number one, he didn't say what these alleged two ways were. You just invent two ways. Why not just say 25 ways? Unless you can point out two ways that the city benefited from that, there's zero credibility in saying protecting taxpayers two ways. The simple fact is you could point to no place in that master agreement that shows protection for taxpayers in any way whatsoever. The fact that there were other parties who would be willing to enter into an agreement to actually run the hospital and weren't given the appropriate opportunity, it just goes further to show that the clinic's bid was simply a rigged bid with no valid reason to be accepted. Also, I remember asking the mayor at a couple of these public hearings, what about an appraisal of the property? Nobody, I didn't hear anybody in this council talking about we need an appraisal to make a rational decision about what makes a good deal or a bad deal. Twice I asked that, and both times it was blown off. If people want to be considered as being thoughtful and appropriate and working for the benefit of the citizens, they really should do elementary things like getting appraisals of valuable property and having their reasons for entering into this agreement stated in public long before they go and engage in entering into a very invalid contract.
Thanks, Mr. Graham. I'll be happy to elaborate. So first, the presumption here is that, it seems to be behind many of the comments, is that the status quo was fine and would have led to 11 more years under the existing agreement of just fine operations. And that's not what the evidence showed nor what the experts showed. So doing nothing would not have conserved Lakewood Hospital nor healthcare services. And that's an important point to draw out. And it's also important to say there was no other proposal put forth by any organization or individuals that would have met as many health needs in our community as that master agreement that we negotiated. I know that that's a belief or hope for, I've heard a number of speakers say you've had private conversations of interest and so on. That's not the same thing. When you're talking about multi-million, tens of millions of dollars and thousands of lives at stake, you need the proposal in writing or it's not real. And certainly you need the proposal in writing for the city of Lakewood to consider it as a governmental body. As many have pointed out, we have an obligation to demonstrate that to the residents. So we didn't have any other proposal. What we did was we improved the initial announced LOI, and we achieved improvements in a number of areas. And this will result in better health care for the residents. And I'm convinced of that, and the proof will come over time, and we'll have to watch for measurable positive outcomes along the way. The 5 benefits, and I will take the time now to go into detail because some of the speakers wanted to have that information. Number 1, healthcare delivery for our residents. The ER is guaranteed as long as the FHC is under operation. And if the clinic were to go below its stated commitment, we would have enforceable rights under that contract. And if the FHC goes out of operation, we have additional rights under that contract. And what we did was we secured 94% of all healthcare services delivered in Lakewood Hospital for some years to be continued in Lakewood at a convenient location. Number two, we preserve hospital funds for healthcare. That's guaranteed by master agreement. What does that mean? That means that the $50 million thereabouts on the balance sheet, which is a subject of some speculation and questions tonight about how much is it really and how much is... First of all, Mr. Graham, it is not the cities, it's LHA's. And you know that because you were part of the discussion in the 80s and in the 90s when this last came up, when the city accounts were converted over to LHA. Those are LHA dollars. Those dollars aren't all nickels in a piggy bank. Those are dollars that are obligated to pay the receivables of the organization and the obligations to the employees. And those $50 million wouldn't last if we continued without adjustments to LHA operations. What we did with the master agreement was that we guaranteed that 24.4 million of those would be conserved for a new health foundation to be used for Little C community purposes for healthcare in a manner that everyone in the community, including you, are welcome to contribute to the strategy for. And in addition, we supplemented or augmented that with a commitment from the clinic of $8 million additional dollars over 16 years. So that's a starting endowment of $24.4 million, conserved LHA dollars, essentially transferred over for healthcare use. That's guaranteed. And then on top of that, another $8 million over time. That's $32.4 million. That's the second of 5 benefits. I got more detail to go. Number 3, protecting taxpayers in 2 major ways. First, it provides significant money, $11 million, to city government to provide a multi-year financial cushion to absorb lost tax revenues. I agree with the concerns and criticisms, or the concerns, because I don't know what alternative we had raised by residents. We do suffer a loss of economic activity. I would prefer that we wouldn't suffer that economic loss. This was the best path available to us given the hard choices that we faced. Status quo would lead to a dead end and losses, and no other concrete proposal or alternative that was viable and long-term and sustainable. So we augmented the deal that we had. So of those $11 million, quite frankly, are funds that come from LHA. And LHA agreed in the spirit of community service and in cushioning the financial impact to the community to, in various ways, continue lease payments and essentially reflect the lost economic activity and give those to the city for a reserve fund so that we could weather the storm of that transition period. The second way that taxpayers have benefited, and this is a very big deal, and it's brought into focus this very night by the docket item we just had for the Hilliard Theater, where we're committing up to $1 million potentially of taxpayer dollars to demolish, for health and safety reasons, a private building that the city frankly shouldn't have to be responsible for, but we are, given the fact that it's a fire hazard, that it's full of asbestos, which is a cancer-causing agent, as many of you know. And we're therefore the insurer of last resort of our community's health and safety. If that private institution known as the Hilliard Theater had been properly managed on the business side, on the private sector side, it wouldn't be a burden on the taxpayers, but it is. That's what's known as a white elephant. We do not want to hope for the best with the Lakewood Hospital building. What we want to do is plan for the worst and prepare for the best, and that's what we've done in this master agreement by doing 2 things that would protect taxpayers. This is the second of those 2 taxpayer benefits. That is to retain site control and allow the city to guide the redevelopment of that property, and second, to attach $7 million in reserve funds. Once again, that's a portion of what, frankly, is LHA dollars to the community redevelopment benefit. What that means is that the final gift of the hospital to the community is twofold. First, to endow a healthcare foundation for the good of the residents and the patients. And second, to responsibly allow for the economic redevelopment of the core of our community in our downtown. Gives us a realistic chance so that we don't end up with an empty building. Our city is not far from Lakewood. You drive a little bit west and you can find an empty hospital in a downtown that's a major source of economic and property tax drag. Those are real concerns we responsibly foresaw and have avoided through this master agreement. Number 4, by providing the economic capacity to redevelop and replace at least part of that lost tax revenue, that $7 million, plus the control over the land and hospital site, we're allowing for the neighboring businesses, the neighboring residential property owners, and everybody who wants to invest in Lakewood to have some confidence that we have an economic plan going forward. And number 5, the employees. Every employee who wanted a job got a job. Every employee that wanted to either stay with the clinic or if they had a different offer, they were able to get a clinic. The clinic was the only healthcare provider who could make and uphold such a commitment. I don't think Metro Hospital would have been able to do that. I don't think University Hospital would have been able to do that. I'll say for the record, I would have fully considered viable inpatient alternative proposals from those two parties if they had been forthcoming, but that circles back to the beginning of the meeting, my long-winded statement here. There was no other proposal put forward by any organization or individuals. Now, my final conclusion is I want to correct for the record, there have been a lot of inaccurate statements about misunderstood facts for the record. In order to be respectful and not constantly debating the same things we've been discussing for more than a year now, I don't typically take up so much time at the end of the council meeting. What I do want to say though is, in my attempt to be respectful and listen, that isn't the same thing as agreeing by my silence that I agree with the narrative facts that Mr. Phillips and Mr. Graham bring forward here. I think, frankly, you're mistaken, and if you want to become unmistaken, you have plenty of record of over more than 50 meetings over the past year in the council records where you can revisit the facts and become informed in them once again. Thank you.
Yes, Councilwoman Marks.
I just have to say something. You know, I've been sitting here since January of last year, working very hard, spending a lot of time on this issue, and I know that many of you think this was very cavalier. It certainly wasn't. It was very serious. But I have to tell you that I'm very offended by your behavior when you sit in this audience and you scoff and sneer and assume that you know everything and the truth sits with you. Don't be so sure of that. And I think that you need to go back and look at manners and how you behave yourself. We are respectful enough to you when you speak at the podium. We may not agree with you, but we do not sneer, we don't point fingers, and we don't call names. I would expect the same respect from you that you expect from us. But to have you sneer and laugh when we're making comments and trying to respond, why would we even respond to you? Why do you think we don't respond to you? So you could laugh and sneer and assume that you have all the truth. I would just suggest that, and Mr. Phillips, if you would have gotten involved back in January, you might not have the questions that you have today. I do appreciate all of your commitment and your passion that you show, and I hope you continue to come to these meetings long after the hospital issue is not a topic of conversation. Thank you.
Thanks. Joanne Gerhardt.
It's been a long evening. I've heard a lot of talk.
Please talk into the mic. We cannot hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, that's much
It's been a long evening.
Ma'am, please start with your name and address
Okay.
for the record. Thanks.
Joanne Gerhardt, 16722 Clifton Boulevard. I'm very concerned about the health of Lakewood residents, especially since we have to wait till November 8th for the vote. What is going to happen to that hospital? It will be a bare shell with nothing in it. That's all I'm saying. Time will tell.
Thank you. Dorothy Abel is our next speaker.
I'm Dorothy Abel at 2180 Alger Road, Lakewood. I am a retired nurse and a Lakewood homeowner for over 50 years. I am upset about even thinking about the demolition of our well-built city hospital, our largest employer of over 1,100 people. The hospital atrium is beautiful. We had an excellent stroke team, cardiac rehab, and post-op physical therapy. Our population is 52,000, many seniors, and a need for inpatient beds. Lakewood has been building new schools. We are letting a big Cleveland Clinic monopoly ruin our city by closing our hospital for a new one 25 miles away. Justice will not let us be fooled. Our established businesses will be affected. These facts are my concerns. We must save jobs and lives by keeping our hospital. Thank you.
Nancy Vaughn.
Nancy Vaughn, 14909 Clifton. Thank you for this forum to speak. All I keep thinking tonight is the emperor has no clothes. No matter how often you say it, healthcare requires inpatient and outpatient care and a fully staffed emergency room. We've needed it for over 100 years, and no matter who says otherwise, we still need it. And one of you, sometimes during this year, is bound to need it for one of you or your loved ones. You will find out. You will reap what you have sown. Lakewood Hospital Association was set up ostensibly to protect the citizens of Lakewood from interlopers, carpetbaggers like the Cleveland Clinic Foundation. It failed us. Members of our administration and council were part of that failure and continue to be. You have time to rectify this. Please do so.
Tom Monty.
Tom Monahan, 1487 Waterbury Road. I again don't know where to begin, what I've heard up here tonight. While my little granddaughter was sleeping today, we watch her every Monday, I read through the master agreement, kept coming back to that restricted covenant, which got a preposterous response from you folks. And some of the comments that you made tonight, Mr. Bullock, preposterous, absolutely preposterous. It shows that you have a lack of knowledge of contract law. Sit there and say, we didn't have a chance. You had all the aces in the pack. When the clinic came in here and said, we want out of this deal, you should have sat down with them and said, okay, what are you proposing? This is what we're proposing. And for them to threaten, hey, we're going to bankrupt you. or we're not gonna have emergency service, the way I negotiate, I'd sit back and say, go ahead and do it. Call their bluff, and you didn't do it. You're just followed. You're like lemmings. The myth makers over at 9500 Euclid Avenue just got this little proposal for you, and you're just parroting it. You know, it's just like they say, we have a downtown hospital. Go find me the downtown hospital. I got $20 on me tonight. If you find the clinic downtown, I'll give you $20. It's at 9500 Euclid Avenue. It's on the east side. They don't want to be associated with the east side. And you know, the reason I found that out, I talked to some poor soul in the PR department. She said, we do not want to confuse our Beechwood customers or clients or whatever they want to call them. That's why we use downtown. The only hospital downtown is a great hospital, been there for 150 years, it's Charity Hospital, where heart surgery started in Cleveland, not at the clinic, downtown with Dr. Earl Kay and Dr. Cross. They invented the heart-lung machine that opened up the doors for the clinic to start making their billions. You know, I've been around the town a long time. Been to a lot of these meetings, and we've had 2 council presidents in my lifetime that I thought were excellent. One was Ed Graham, and one was Bob Seeley. And if you guys want to measure up to those fellas, you got a long way to go. Because they stood there, they didn't sit there and chastise people. And Cindy, didn't I bring over the Metro proposal to your house because you said you hadn't read it?
Yes.
So, I mean, you're sitting here and telling us you did all this study and everything?
No, I didn't say that. I just said that you're rude.
Oh, I'll take that. It's a compliment if you're directing it at me. You haven't seen me rude. The idea that, you know, we're going to drag this out to November is fine. As I said, I really don't care at this point. Oh, one of the things that I wanted, you made a remark, Mr. Bullock, about an empty hospital somewhere? Where's that empty hospital?
In the city of Lorraine,
What is it?
St. Joe's closed. It's a vacant building.
Yeah, but I mean, they went out of business. They merged.
Nobody was there to buy it.
Well, I hate to bring this up again. I talked to some gentlemen from LifePoint Healthcare System last week. They bought a hospital south of Atlanta, Georgia, run by a group of nuns. They got in trouble with a $210 million HUD loan. They went in there and bought the nuns out, paid off all their outstanding debt, and it's a thriving hospital today. And I talked to the guy about our situation here. He says, I wish I had known about this last year. We might have had a customer. But, as you know, we've had conversations, Mr. Bullock, about the release. And Mr. Butler told my wife and I that the mayor would negotiate with no other system but the clinic. What? You're denying that? You're calling my wife and me a liar?
No, I'm just denying that that's back.
Unfortunately, we'll have to conclude the remarks there for tonight.
All right.
Thanks. The next speaker is Bonnie Rubin.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay,
Where do you live?
I'm sorry?
Where do you live?
Oh, right. My name's Bonnie Rubin, and I live at 14401 Detroit. As far as the election in November, I kind of assumed that that's when it was going to be. I'm very disappointed that it's not going to be next week along with the primaries. And also, as far as a possible special election, although I don't keep figures very well in my head, simple arithmetic tells me that the cost of a special election is a lot less than the amount of money we're going to lose by letting Cleveland Clinic, which I consider a corporation much more than healthcare, do what they want to do. And like so many of us, I don't understand the non-compete clause. I am hoping that since we're waiting till November, that you will look into any prospective buyers and give them a fair shot at the hospital. I think we need a hospital. I don't see the reasons for closing it. I don't see the reasons for letting Cleveland Clinic out of their lease and it being so secretive. Again, I just hope that you'll look at prospective buyers and possibly look at our health care, not at what Cleveland Clinic wants. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Boyle.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I don't want to get into too much debating here, so I hesitate to talk. But I think, ma'am, I partly say we'd be happy to look into alternative buyers. That's what we were doing last year. There were none. And Mr. Monahan refers to conversations of interest. I believe you that you're having conversations of interest. That's not a proposal for a buyer. Those are conversations about speculation. So I could talk about maybe my interest with some buddies in opening a restaurant or a pub, and often do, and that's a fun thing. But that's very different than actually going to the bank, lining up a loan, getting blueprints, doing a build out, hiring staff, getting the legal paperwork. We don't have those things. So there are no buyers. And in addition to that, we have had more than one industry expert do an analysis of the Northeast Ohio healthcare market, which is different than the Atlanta healthcare market, and different than the Texas market, and so forth. We're overbedded. We're on a glide path towards fewer beds. And in addition to that, you can see the the Affordable Care Act payment changes coming, which will force further contraction in the industry. So we've done the very things in 2015, LHA did the discernment in 2013-14 that we're being invited to do. And I say that not to be dismissive, but to just to remind everyone that we've been looking at these very issues. I think that council has expressed interest in alternatives to an outpatient model, to retain an inpatient model, and hasn't come up with a realistic and feasible one to the community's advantage. So that's why we ended up negotiating the master agreement and to review the confidential meetings in executive session were legal, appropriate, and successful in enhancing the final terms of that master agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Bullock. Ms. Pepper.
Tara Peppard, 1278 Edwards Avenue. Councilman Bullock, I don't know how you can speak to us as you do, vehemently denying your wrongdoings and claiming that you are making an honest and fair decision in the best interest of the people. You are not. There was tortious interference. There was a decanting plan. There was no advertising, none, saying Lakewood Hospital, Cleveland Clinic no longer wants to operate Lakewood Hospital. Lakewood is seeking another partner. Nothing. All it was declining patient volumes, financial woes, hospital must close. You did a great job at that advertising, but no advertising to say, let's get someone in to run our hospital. So you cannot speak to the people and expect us, Ms. Marks, expect us to not respond without anger. It's wrong. Outrage. It's wrong. It's morally wrong. Your legal and moral obligation is to your people to hold the clinic responsible to their contract or to put out an RFP and a true open public bid. That was your moral obligation. We will not be quiet. We are a remarkable group, an unbelievable group. I am sure the Cleveland Clinic never expected such a fight from a community, only in Lakewood. We're informed, we're involved, and we will not accept this. Why don't you respond to Brian Essie when he speaks? It is so completely apparent. That bankruptcy threat, I remember speaking to both you and Councilman Marks, or it was Councilman Anderson and Councilman Marks. They're going to file bankruptcy. What are we going to do? What else can we do? That's shameful. You're perpetuating a lie. The administrative fees and a manufactured plan to destroy our hospital, that's what destroyed our hospital. Why did you choose public office? I strongly recommend you choose the side of truth and not greed. You've chosen November 8th. November 8th it is. In this interim period, protect our hospital site. Protect our well-funded, profitable hospital. No water damage, no fires, no electrical issues, no wrecking ball in the middle of the night. Will you assure me of this? Will you assure me that until the people have our voice on November 8th, will you assure me that that site will be protected? I beg you for an answer on that.
Well, I would provide that the properties that the city of Lakewood owns, we, and you know, the administration have encouraged to weigh in if there's something contrary, but there are no plans currently to demolish any of the structures that the city of Lakewood owns. As you know, properties changed hands when the agreement was signed. There are properties that the city of Lakewood or LHA no longer owns, that the Cleveland Clinic Foundation now owns. Those properties that the Cleveland Clinic Foundation owns, they will have the ability to do with as they see fit, given that it's their property. But in the meantime, the city has no plans to demolish the hospital. In fact, as you know, the emergency room is still very much up and running. It's a critical portion of that property to the south section. We also have the Curtis Block, which was recently designated as an historical building in Lakewood. Likewise, there are no plans to demolish or otherwise drastically modify the Curtis Block that I'm aware of in the near term. Similarly, the front part of the hospital, I know that people have attended meetings in which we've discussed the fact that that could possibly be repurposed in some way. I know that City Council has discussed the fact that the 5.7 acres generally are still a process for which we look forward to community visioning and the discussion of what that new portion of our downtown will look like. But you know, to your point about is the hospital building at Bell in Detroit going to be demolished prior to November? No, there's no plan to demolish that structure.
Yeah, just to put some flesh on that question, the property where the medical office building is and parking garage have been sold. Those were owned by the city. They're now owned by the Cleveland Clinic Foundation. There was an appraisal, a mutually agreed upon appraiser, and the price came in at $1.6 million for about 1.8 acres of land. Actually, a much higher price than we thought we could get for that parcel. Good news. And that money has exchanged hands to the city. So the city, Cleveland Clinic, in fact, has custody of that property. The 5.7, as Council President O'Leary said, remains owned by the city. It actually is, there's a lease agreement that will continue to be paid through June of 2018 for that property. So it will remain actually as it is until, for really 2.5 years. So even if there was another party wanting to come in, the Cleveland Clinic actually has a lease that they're paying on the existing hospital site. You know, that's so it's a property site. So that was an important element. Many of you argued that the clinic should continue to pay the lease. Well, the fact is they are through June of 2018.
But not through June of 2026.
That's correct. So the fact of the matter is, what happens to Lakewood Hospital on the 5.7 acres is something that would likely happen after June 2018. So, so to answer your question, nothing will likely happen there.
Thanks very much. Pam Watula
Thank
is
you.
our next speaker.
Pam Latula, 118 Clifton, 11813 Clifton. Ooh, late. Listen, sorry for the laughing and stuff, but you know what? Sorry, Tom Bullock. You don't pay receivables. I had to snicker, okay? And your arguments are full of holes I don't have time to go into. But when you say the statement, weather the storm of transition, this money that you say is to help us weather the storm of the transition, it proves our point. This is not enhancing Lakewood's economic well-being. You are counting on those funds from Cleveland Clinic that you think you're going to get to maintain us at our current level through this, your own words, weather the storm of the transition period. All with uncertain amounts of wind-down costs and what funds are actually available to us. That's not really why I came up here the second time. Would you please? I have a handout for council, and I had just 4 copies because I didn't want to waste any more paper. On November 3rd, 2015, we held a general election in Lakewood.
Ma'am?
Yeah, oh, go this way. Oh, there you go. I just thought one for each 2 of you, two. Please don't count against me. That's always an exciting time in election, but there was some disappointment, and I'm not really talking only about the election results. I was a coordinator. There were some shenanigans. I coordinated some poll watchers, and Save Lakewood Hospital Pro 64 signs and a couple of political people's signs were missing at 3 of the precincts. I found that out about 10 minutes till 7 in the morning. I laughed those off, but you know, nobody else's signs were missing. But there was another issue that I found more disturbing, and I'm not speaking for Save Lakewood Hospital. I'm speaking for Pam Latula, who's a resident who lives in Ward 4 and the city of Lakewood. Take a look at the handouts. Those are pictures of cars. The city designated 20 to 30 spots. There was a couple long rows that had city signs, and they were designated for the precincts Ward 4 E, I, and J. Those are the precincts that were assigned to vote at City Hall. Although the city assigned an area for voters, when the voters came to vote, all those spots were filled except for 5 parking spots, predominantly throughout the day. Because I was coordinating all the poll watchers, I had reports back. At one point, one of my poll watchers, actually Judy Gillespie, actually called me to tell me that she was, you know, what was going on, and she had just watched people drive off because there was no place to park so that they could vote. Judy first went to the voting place where they were voting inside City Hall. Then she went to the mayor's office and spoke to Shannon. Then she went back outside and she found Mary, the meter maid, and she talked to Mary. Mary came out sometime later to review the situation, and even claiming that at one point she saw a couple of those cars, she knew who they were. Mary said she was going to talk to the police department about it. When the police came out sometime later, they came out because our people's chairs were in the wrong place, and they were asked, the police officers asked, did the meter maid talk to you about the lack of availability of parking spots for Ward 4 voters? And the police men knew nothing about that. If City Hall is to be a voter precinct, a place for people to vote, it is an expectation that voters should be able to easily park, enter the building, and vote. Some were encouraged to park in the police spots by some of our people, and I would never do that because I don't want a ticket, okay? There are about 2,508 registered voters on November 3rd in those 3 precincts. I'm not saying that all these people are out there to vote, that even the majority of them would have voted on that day. Though the majority of voters in precincts 1A, B, H, and I, and 3A, and a few others, over 50% of those voters did vote. We don't really know. How many could not vote of those 3 Ward 4 precincts? We will never really know. But I do come to you with a solution. Number 1, we have voting next week. It would be a very easy thing to implement that the City Hall employees vote at the annex. Now, some people have said, well, voters could have voted there. I have to tell you, a lot of people don't know that exists. And there was nothing there that said voter parking. So there is no reason to expect that you can go to another city building and park. But the city employees could park there that day. Number 2, you could put a ribbon around all those little meters in the area and let the city employees and court people park there on Detroit, allowing our voters easy access into the building. They have time constraints, they're going to work, they're on lunch hour.
I'm sorry, I appreciate your points here, but we're already past 5 minutes. So.
Okay, I want to tell you that I'm going to be monitoring this, and I would like some assurance that you will make it easier for Ward 4, precincts E, I, and J to vote at City Hall in the next election next Tuesday. Thank you.
Brian Essie is our next speaker.
Thank you, Brian Essie, 15306 Edgewater Drive. I want to thank all of you for the hard work and the long docket that we just went through. That is hard work, and I appreciate that as a citizen. At the same time, I was one that laughed, and I'm not going to apologize for that. I found Mr. Bullock's comments insulting. Insulting to my intelligence and insulting to anything that resembles facts. He speaks in terms of, always, this is a constant theme, talking about different interpretation of facts. Well, there's not an interpretation of facts. The Metro proposal, the one that I uncovered by pushing this body or this city to get to release it from September 14, said 900 jobs were promised. Not half of what we had, unless we had 1,800. So that's a fact that is not a fact. It's not a way of interpreting them. An enforceable contract right, Mr. Bullock referred to. The contract does not say, as long as the clinic, as Mr. Phillips pointed out, as long as the clinic owns the FHC, that it will have an ER or an ED. Those are defined terms in the federal law. It says we will have emergency services, which are not defined in the contract. So it is not enforceable other than to get emergency services. So let's just say, for example, we have the mobile stroke unit rendering emergency services in Lakewood. The Cleveland Clinic could reduce the emergency room to what folks call an urgent care. It is an ER now under the federal law. Now, Mr. Siley mentioned on some other less valuable properties we're hiring a broker. We never hired a broker. No one hired a broker to sell Lakewood Hospital or lease Lakewood Hospital. I have before me on my computer something that was the second RFP that's been referred to when it came out of the litigation. It includes the words, in addition, proposal should include an explanation to describe the primary rationale for any change or reduction in the current scope of services given respondents, and that's apostrophe S singular, announced intention to add inpatient services of roughly equivalent size in terms of beds at other nearby facilities. This RFP was addressed only to Cleveland Clinic. No one has ever been offered an FHC ER concept and a liquidation bid for this property. And that's the problem that I have most of all. We had $120 million valuation. I'm giving those documents before. It was $70 million by Subsidian of comparable sales, like a broker would get, even though they weren't a broker, and $50 million of liquid assets. We never tested the market. We had one track going down one way for the RFP of 20 years for a hospital, inpatient for one group of people, and another track for the clinic. That's bid rigging. That's bid steering. Now,
That's not true. You know, I got to take you on that. So I don't know how we want, not tonight, but so tonight.
I'd love to have a discussion with you one-on-one, publicly or privately, because I have looked at the documents. I've got 32 years of experience of doing this, and I don't take this lightly. So, I don't know how much time I have left. 94% of services, this is another thing that's not a fact. This is a misinformation thing. This is nonsense. It's silly. Then the $24 million, I've already written on this. It's really 16 and a half, because you bring it back. So the last dollars are in 2026. Present discounted cash flow. $18 million? No, it's $4 million, and the clinic has dibs on all that. Then who's going to run this money? Mr. Bullock, I understand you're no longer a part of LHA, and I doubt that Mr. Litton is, and neither is Mary Louise Madigan. How are we going to control LHA in the contract to decide with our city
what the rules are for this money and how it's going to be used. This is more of the same, of rights that we didn't enforce under the old agreement. Now, the $66 million I mentioned earlier, this is almost silly. We have a $120 million property, we're using $66 million if the wind down expenses are $78 million, as Mr. Summers claims. It's crazy. It's crazy town. This doesn't make any sense in any business I've ever handled, and this is a burial of sins. It's a burial of sins of the people that mismanaged LHA. And I want to make something clear. I don't think the bankruptcy was a fraud when Mr. Anderson said it and Mr. O'Leary. I think they repeated what they heard. But no one could force LHA into bankruptcy. It's a nonprofit entity.
Thanks, Mr.
It's only LHA could take it into bankruptcy. And that means LHA threatened that.
Okay.
Thank you.